Elizabeth suddenly stopped at the entrance of the restaurant. She turned slightly to look behind her, upon which she caught sight of a black shadow ducking in the bushes. She hesitated momentarily before turning away from the restaurant. A burst of blue ice and frost appeared beneath her feet, and she disappeared in the blink of an eye. She's gone. After a while, a man in a black jumpsuit emerged from the aforementioned bush. He looked around with a flustered expression before stomping his foot, and merging back into the darkness. "Fox is spying on me?" Elizabeth was sitting right on a tree branch beside the bush, and her brows furrowed slightly in deep thought at the sight of the figure that had disappeared into the darkness. "Looks like father was right. Those people are not trustworthy. I'll have to make a trip to that place today." Elizabeth gently massaged the ring on her right thumb as she mused to herself. She took one final glance at the Mamie restaurant before disappearing into thin air, leaving only a trail of ice and frost on that tree branch. "Young master, board member DeVoe from the DeVoe Tavern and board member Gudania from Gudania Clocks have been very secretive, and we were only able to discover some basic information despite paying a hefty price." In a slightly dim room, Mars reported his findings to Cyril, who was seated behind his desk. Mars had adopted the same respectful demeanor as he did when interacting with President Jeffrey, even the humble smile that he wore was identical. Cyril gently tapped an intricate red tobacco pipe on the table with furrowed brows. He said, "So, tell me what you know. Both of them are board members of our Chamber of Commerce, and they're renowned figures in Chaos City. Who would dare to offend our Chamber of Commerce like this by taking them away for no good reason? From the information that we have gathered, we have deduced that they might have been involved in a Level 4 incident and a Level 3 incident at the same time," Mars replied with a grave expression. "Young master, Level 4 incidents are already confidential in the Grey Temple. I suggest we do not get involved in this." "A Level 4 incident?" Cyril pursed his lips and leaned back in his leather chair with a nonchalant look. "So what? Didn't you say that the people from the DeVoe Tavern and Gudania Clocks have already given us the money? Use half of that money to bribe the people at the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle so we can bail those two out of prison. Otherwise, people are going to think that our Chamber of Commerce is too weak, and that we can't even protect our board members. If any other issues arise, just resolve them with money. If we don't have enough money, then ask for more from the two shops." But, Mars was still quite concerned. "That's enough. Young Mistress Chanel is waiting for me tonight. Deposit the money with Buffett Banks this time as well, and give me the deposit slips." Cyril stuck his pipe into his pocket, and whistled as he walked out the door. "Level 4 incidents can't be resolved with just money. Things are a lot more complicated than you can imagine, young master," Mars mused to himself with a resigned expression, and fell into deep thought as he stood alone in the dimly lit room. Yabimiya and Sally returned to the restaurant, and quickly returned to work. The restaurant returned to its former level of efficiency, and aside from the missing door as well as the trees on the corner of the plaza that had disappeared, everything was the same as it had been before. All of the customers were gradually consoled by the delicious cuisine they were dining on, and as they basked in the enjoyment of dining, they soon forgot their horror and displeasure. "Father, Big Sister Zixi and Big Bear have fallen asleep after Big Sister Aisha attended to them. Master Turtle says they're fine now, and will recover after some sleep." Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms as she informed Mag of what had happened. A bright smile had returned to her adorable little face. "You all did very well. You've done a good deed." Mag nodded with a smile as he surveyed Amy and the others with approval in his eyes. Sally had risked exposure to treat the Dryad couple, Yabimiya was quite powerless but still led from the front, and Amy had expressed an urge to help them the entire time. All three of them were very kind-hearted, which was very pleasing for him to see. He didn't object to helping others, as long as it was within their ability. Elated smiles appeared on the faces of Amy and Yabimiya. Sally was cleaning the tableware, but she also wore a faint smile as if she had never been praised before. After wolfing down a second bowl of rice and devouring the final chunk of shiitake mushroom, Novan put down his bowl and chopsticks with a genuine expression of contentment, and praised, "I have to admit, this is the most delicious food I've ever had. Is it enough to change the world?" Krasu had finished his braised chicken and rice at roughly the same time, and he turned to Principal Novan with an inquisitive look. "If even normal families can create such delicious meals, then it's definitely enough to revolutionize the food culture on the Norland continent," Novan replied with a nod. "If even normal families could make this, then they wouldn't be charging 800 copper coins per dish." Krasu pursed his lips. "So, if you want to change the world, then this is still not enough." Novan chuckled. "That's not necessarily the case. Even if they can't make the same type of food, enhancing the flavor of normal dishes is undoubtedly something that many people would be willing to try." Krasu offered an opposing opinion as he pointed to the bowl in front of him with a smile. "This is a direction. The task of changing the world can never fall upon the shoulders of a single person, but perhaps he can point out the right direction." Novan fell silent upon hearing that, but his eyes grew brighter and brighter as he stared at the bowl. He suddenly stood up and rushed out the door as he said, "I have something important that I have to do. Thank you for your hospitality, I thoroughly enjoyed that meal." "Hey, you still haven't eaten your tofu pu." Krasu extended a hand toward Novan, but the latter had already disappeared out the door. He looked at the untouched tofu pudding in front of him, and shrugged as he spooned some of it into his mouth. Savory tofu pudding isn't all that delicious anyway, so it's not really a tragedy to miss out on it. Several people from other tables turned to stare at the bowl of untouched tofu pudding on the table. Many of them wanted to take it for themselves, but they didn't dare to ask Krasu for it. "Master Halfbeard, I wouldn't be able to beat those big doggies, right? I'm so angry." Amy climbed onto Krasu's table and appraised him with a stern expression on her little face. Krasu was very amused by Amy's adorable expression of rage, but he still replied seriously, "Who said that? Our little Amy will only needs to cast a fireball to take care of all of those little doggies." "Really?" Amy was a little skeptical. Even though she hadn't tried it, those big doggies looked very ferocious, and she didn't know if a fireball spell would be enough to bring them down. "Of course. Just not now. As long as little Amy learns magic from me diligently, it won't be long before you can blast those little doggies away with your fireball magic." Krasu nodded with an earnest expression before smilingly continuing, "Of course, if you want to use your staff to knock them on their heads, then that works as well. All right, I'll be sure to focus on my studies. If they ever come back, I'll smash them in the head." Amy nodded with a serious expression before her gaze fell on the untouched bowl of tofu pudding. Her eyes then immediately lit up, and she turned to Krasu with elation on her face. "Master, is that for me? Aren't you already full?" Krasu asked with a peculiar expression. "I was, but I got so angry, and that made me hungry again, so I should eat it. I haven't eaten savory tofu pudding tonight." Amy had already grabbed the bowl, and was digging in with elation. Krasu shook his head with a resigned smile, but it was quite pleasant for him to watch her enjoy her food. As such, he also picked up his bowl of sweet tofu pudding, and continued to eat it. "Amy, this is a magic shield that can be used thrice. If you encounter a dangerous situation, use a small fireball to burn that reed bead, and the magic shield will unfurl on its own to ensure your safety." After finishing his meal, Krasu pulled out a beautiful blue crystal bracelet and put it on Amy's wrist. There was a small red bead that was about the size of her pinky in its center. There were some complex symbols inscribed upon it in extremely small font, giving it an air of mystery and intrigue. All of the customers were a little envious at the sight of Amy's new bracelet. A magic shield created by such a powerful magic caster would undoubtedly be very useful. Furthermore, it was very portable and light. All of the onlookers wished that they had such a thoughtful and powerful master. "That sounds really awesome. Can I try it now?" Amy's eyes lit up with an eager expression as she looked at the bracelet. Not now. You have to wait until you're in a dangerous situation before using it. You can only use it 3 times, so make sure not to waste those opportunities. If I were to make a new one, I'd have to wait for materials to arrive from Rodu. Krasu hurriedly stopped her from experimenting with the bracelet. The magic shield could protect her from all attacks below the 9th tier for a duration of 3 minutes. As mentioned, it could be activated on 3 separate occasions, and both the materials used as well as the crafting process were very complex. All right. Thank you, Master Halfbeard. Amy nodded and extended words of gratitude to Krasu. You're welcome. Krasu waved a hand with a smile on his face. He was always happy to spoil his adorable little disciple. After finishing his tofu pudding, Krasu paid for his meal and departed. Sargeras had gone off somewhere, but he soon led his burning legion back to the restaurant. However, only Sargeras entered the restaurant, with a chair hoisted in his hand. The customers sitting at the table closest to the door just so happened to be leaving, and he sat down in front of that table with his folding chair. May I take your order? Yabimiya strode over to him with a smile. Sargeras had sent a werewolf flying with his chair, and led his group of lava demons in an assault against the werewolves earlier. As such, Yabimiya had a very good impression of the scary-looking but kind-hearted lava demons. She then took a confused glance at all of the other demons standing outside the restaurant, and thought to herself, there are still tables available in the restaurant, why aren't they coming in to have a seat? I want 30 Rigiamos, Sargeras replied with a bashful smile. Everyone in the restaurant turned to him in unison upon hearing that. 30 Rigiamos. They had never seen anyone buy so many at once. 30. Yabimiya was also a little taken aback. Sargeras' usual order only consisted of around 11 Rigiamos. That's right. According to the traditions of us lava demons, the most valiant warriors in battle have to be rewarded. All of them performed quite well today. Sargeras nodded with a smile, and turned to look at the lava demons outside the restaurant as a content expression appeared on his face. All right, please wait a moment. However, if they're going to dine as well, they can come in and take a seat, Yabimiya reminded with a smile. That's all right, let them eat outside. If they come in, they might scare away other customers. Sargeras shook his head with a bashful smile. Scaring other customers was only the secondary reason, he was much more fearful that one of the lava demons would accidentally set the restaurant on fire, in which case he would not be able to afford the damages. All right, then. Yabimiya didn't press any further. There was no rule stipulating that Rigiamos had to be eaten within the restaurant anyway. She turned around, and strode toward the kitchen. Mag smiled after hearing Sargeras' order, and said, I'll give them 36 as a sign of my gratitude. That'll amount to 1 extra for each of them. He also had a good impression of those lava demons. In particular, he'd been very touched when they had stepped in earlier and yelled the war cry for Rigiamo. Keel, is this so-called holy Rigiamo really that delicious? Marxa asked Keel, who was waiting with anticipation shimmering in his eyes. It's not simply delicious. You'll know when you taste it, it's addictively delicious, Keel answered with a mysterious smile. I'm really looking forward to it now. Cassus rubbed his bald head with a bashful and eager smile. Amy pulled out a bench and sat on it at the entrance to the restaurant with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She then looked at the lava demons, and began to give them nicknames. Big Bald Head, and Bald Heads number 2, 3, 4, Keel and the others all wore peculiar expressions, but their leader had already accepted the nickname of Big Bald Head, so what could they do? Your Rigiamos are ready. After a short while, Yabimiya emerged from the kitchen with a small mountain of Rigiamos. She placed the platter of Rigiamos on the table with a smile, and said, as thanks for your help earlier today, our boss has given each of you another Rigiamo for free. He has my thanks. Sargeras' eyes lit up as he grabbed 6 Rigiamos for himself from the platter. Yabimiya carried the platter outside, and distributed the rest of the Rigiamos to the lava demons. The meat smells so good. Is this the legendary Holy Rigiamo? Kalzak's eyes were practically glowing as he stared at the Rigiamos in his hands. They look really delicious, but they're a little small. I can eat 2 in one mouthful. Cassus tore open a paper bag, and bit off half of a Rigiamo with one bite. The other demons also took large bites out of their Rigiamos to replenish the energy they had expended during battle. Delicious. This feeling. It feels like something is about to come out of my body. All of the demons who were tasting the Rigiamo for the first time were flabbergasted. Roar! All of them roared almost in unison as flames erupted from their bodies, making it appear as if balls of fire had been ignited at the entrance of the restaurant. Wow, that looks really cool. Amy's mouth was slightly agape as she looked on with an adorable expression. The collective roar and scorching flames erupting from the lava demons outside the restaurant managed to attract the attention of all of the customers and passers-by. After all, it wasn't every day that such a spectacular sight could be witnessed. How is this possible? I seem to have broken through a barrier. My power level has been stuck at the 4th tier for over 20 years, but I just jumped straight to the 5th tier. I can also clearly feel my barrier budging. Even though I didn't make a breakthrough, I should be able to make one soon. I also made a breakthrough. I'm at the 5th tier now. Cassus, Marxa, and Kalzak were all ecstatic, and they stared at the Rigiamos in their hands with incredulity. The barrier that had troubled the lava demons for several hundred years had been broken by a mouthful of Rigiamo. Their mouths were wide open upon witnessing such a miracle, and if it weren't for the fact that they were experiencing it firsthand, they would have never believed that something like that was possible. Holy Rigiamo! This is a beacon of hope for the resurgence of us lava demons. Cassus stuffed the remaining half of the Rigiamo in his mouth, and he could feel his blood churning in his veins. Lava flowed on the surface of his body, and an indescribable feeling welled up within him as if the passion that had lain dormant for countless years within his body was set alight. The lava demons felt as if they could suddenly see back to all those years ago, when their species had stood at the pinnacle of the Norland continent. Looks like making them eat outside was the right decision. Sargeras glanced outside with a smile on his face. His dream was to have more of his brethren taste the Rigiamo, and that was also the goal toward which the Burning Legion strove. Why do I feel like Mag just recruited a bunch of powerful bodyguards? That's not important. They just helped out Mag, and Mag gave them a free Rigiamo each in return. If an opportunity like this arises in the future, we have to make sure to grab it with both hands. I'm willing to risk my life if he can give me a free sweet tofu pudding. All of the customers discussed spiritedly among themselves as they looked at the lava demons outside the restaurant. Of course, most of them were more focused on the rewards the lava demons had received. A smile also appeared on Mag's face as he looked at the lava demons outside. It was his pleasure to bring some extra benefits to his customers with his food rather than just fill their stomachs and satisfy their taste buds. Customers came and went. Those that were late to the scene were very curious with regard to how the restaurant's door had disappeared. Thankfully, there were many kind-hearted customers who were willing to offer explanations. I heard that a 10th tier golden dragon wanted to eat an extra serving of tofu pudding tonight, but Mag refused, and it threatened to trash the restaurant in its rage. However, its attempt to do so was foiled by 2 magic casters, and the 3 of them fought a devastating battle. In the end, Principal Novan had to interfere to bring the situation under control, but by then, the door had already been destroyed during the melee. The stories being told by the customers became more and more exaggerated and preposterous as time wore on, and Mag shook his head in resignation. We have reached closing time, and all of the ingredients that we've prepared have been used up. Please come back tomorrow. Mag stood at the entrance of the restaurant, and politely turned away all of the customers who were trying to enter. The lack of a door created quite a peculiar sight. All right, but if a giant 10th tier dragon is onto your restaurant, then you have to make sure to be careful. If you can't handle it on your own, apply for protection from the Grey Temple. I want to be able to come and dine at your restaurant far into the future, a customer urged with a concerned expression. I'll be sure to do so. Mag nodded with a resigned expression. He couldn't turn down the concern that his customers were extending to him, but he didn't know who had spread the rumor about the giant 10th-tier dragon. As far as he knew, there didn't appear to be such a powerful being that was targeting the restaurant. Yabimiya strode over to him, and asked, "Boss, should I go and find someone to fix the door? I wonder if any carpenters would be willing to come at such a late hour." "Don't worry about. I'll go find a shady craftsman, and he'll install a new door." Mag shook his head with a smile before saying to Yabimiya and Sally, "You two should hurry home. You still have to work tomorrow morning, so go back early and rest. Please watch your mouth. The wooden door produced by the system is most definitely of an impeccable quality. Moreover, the price is very competitive, so there's no semblance of shoddiness involved whatsoever." The system's indignant voice erupted. Mag ignored the system as he turned to Sally, and asked, "By the way, Aisha, how many orders did we take today, and how much money did we make?" Sally pulled out a notepad from behind the counter, and did some careful calculations before delivering a report. "Today, we made a total of 136 servings of Yangzhou fried rice, 650 rijiamos, 820 tofu puddings, 416 servings of braised chicken with rice, and 512 servings of plain rice, and we made a total of 799,000 copper coins from 1,022 orders. Wow, so much money!" Amy's eyes immediately lit up, and it was as if there were little stars shimmering in her pupils. 799,000. How much money is that? Yabimiya looked up into the sky and thought about it carefully. In the past, her monthly wage had been 600 copper coins, but the restaurant had made more than 1,000 times that in just a day. If all of that were to be converted into copper coins, it would definitely be able to pile up a small mountain. Nice. Mag nodded with a smile. He, too, was pleasantly surprised. 799,000 copper coins in total earnings amounted to a gross profit of close to 500,000 copper coins. What did it mean to have a daily income of 500,000? It meant that if he could keep up this rate of income, his restaurant would be able to earn 180 million copper coins in a year. 200 million copper coins of income in a year from running a restaurant. Just when did earning money become so easy? Even Mag himself was feeling a little stunned. Back when he had first opened the restaurant, he'd only been hoping that it would generate enough income to ensure the survival of his daughter and himself. However, as more and more dishes were introduced, and the number of customers increased by the day, his profit margins expanded drastically, and the rate of development had far exceeded his expectations. Mag smiled, and said to Sally and Yabimiya, "Very good. Let's keep this up. We'll set a small target, let's earn 100 million first. Next month, I'll be able to give all of you pay rises." The meteoric rise of the restaurant had been heavily dependent on the highly efficient and accurate work Yabimiya and Sally had done. As such, they deserved higher wages as reciprocation. "Boss, I feel like my wages are already very high, and I'm very satisfied." Yabimiya immediately waved her hands. "I also feel the same way." Sally nodded in agreement. She was already very content with the fact that she could have a serving of Yangzhou fried rice and 2 tofu puddings a day. "You deserve better," Mag said with a smile, but he didn't press them any further. "Father, can I go to visit Big Sister Zixi and Big Bear before I go to bed? They didn't even finish their meal earlier, won't they be hungry?" Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms, and looked up at Mag with a concerned expression. Sally nodded, and said, "They're still very weak due to excessive blood loss. The magic potions can help them recover to a certain extent, but if they want to make full recovery, they will require more rest and nutrition." She was the one who had administered treatment to the two of them, so she was quite familiar with their condition. I'll go and cook and some chicken soup for them. They probably won't be able to eat anything substantial anyway. Let's gather the leftovers for a late dinner to celebrate our earnings today. Mag nodded with contentment. He was in a very good mood. At that rate, he would be able to purchase his next strength point soon, and the level of his restaurant would also increase as a result. After being fooled around with by the system for so long, he was actually also quite curious how the restaurant would change after reaching level 2. Perhaps he would be gifted with some new powers. Of course, Mag was mainly looking forward to the upgrade in the restaurant's defense system. The events that had transpired earlier during the day gave him a sense of urgency. He was in an alternate world, after all, there were countless powerful and dangerous beings there. As such, it was quite a concern that even a 4th-tier werewolf could easily break into his restaurant and pose a threat to himself as well as his daughter. The underlying hazards made him feel quite insecure, so he was very eager to upgrade the restaurant. If its level could continue to increase, the defensive system would become progressively more powerful until it became the safest fortress in the world. If he could upgrade the defense system to the highest level, even if the things that happened all those years ago were to reoccur, he would be able to sit back with Amy and relax, watching from the restaurant without any fear for their safety. Mag was slightly looking forward to such a scenario. "Father, am I really allowed to eat before I go to bed tonight?" Amy's eyes immediately lit up. Meg had always prohibited her from eating before bed. "Yes, tonight is a special exception." Mag nodded with a smile before turning to Sally and Yabimiya. "You two should eat before you go as well." "Really?" Yabimiya's eyes shimmered with excitement. Sally was also full of anticipation upon hearing that. "Of course. If you're worried about them, then pay them a visit and see if they can eat something. I'll go prepare dinner." Mag nodded, and turned toward the kitchen. "Then we'll be going now," Amy said as she and Sally walked out the door. "System, install a door for me," Mag instructed internally as he looked at the empty streets outside the restaurant. "The system refuses to provide service for a slanderous customer," the system replied in a tsundere voice. "I see. Looks like I'll have to take a break tomorrow to fix the door. I was hoping that at this rate, I'd be able to upgrade the restaurant in about 10 days or so, but it appears that these things cannot be rushed. I should take things slowly," Mag said with a calm and collected expression. He pulled a fired chicken drumstick out of the fridge, and began to chop it up in a slow and methodical manner. "After reassessment by the system, it was found that you have good credit. Even though you insulted the system, this is only your first offense, so it can be overlooked," the system said after a momentary silence. "Just waive the installation fee this time. What can you do with 10 copper coins anyway? You're destined to earn big money in the future, so it would make you seem too petty if you were to focus so intently on 10 copper coins," Mag interjected before the system had a chance to finish. He soaked a handful of shiitake mushrooms in some water, and began to stir-fry the chicken. "This is a stern warning, do not interrupt the system's speech. I have a personality. I have dignity. I need respect." The system's enraged voice sounded. Mag put down the knife in his hand with a serious expression, and asked, "Then let me ask you this. What is more important, 10 copper coins or your dignity?" The system fell into a prolonged period of silence. Ding! 10 copper coins installation fee successfully taken. Ding! Wooden door successfully crafted. Ding! 20 gold coins wooden door crafting fee successfully taken. Wooden door is now being installed, the system notified with an elated voice, and a new door was installed in the restaurant in the blink of an eye. Mag looked at the notification for the successful installation of the restaurant door and opened his mouth, but swallowed his words in the end. The system's shamelessness knew no bounds. "Fine, you win." The late dinner consisted of Yongzhou fried rice as well as braised chicken with rice. After all, eating arugiyamo before bed could make it difficult to fall asleep, and making tofu pudding from scratch was too difficult. Furthermore, the amount of daily consumption of tofu pudding had to be regulated as well. Mag cooked 2 portions of braised chicken in 2 different pots. He didn't put any ingredients aside from chicken and shiitake mushroom in the pot that was meant for the dryad couple. He also put more soup in that one as the main objective was to cook some chicken soup for them. Chicken soup was very nourishing, particularly when coupled with shiitake mushrooms, and would contribute greatly to their recovery. In the other pot, he cooked the braised chicken as he normally would. They had had an early dinner, and after 4 hours of intense work, Mag really was feeling a little hungry. Sally and Yabimiya had run themselves ragged in the restaurant, so they most likely felt the same. That was why he decided to cook a late dinner for everyone. Mag placed the lid on his earthenware pot, and thought to himself, for a late dinner, spicy crawfish, lamb and kidney kebabs, and beer are mandatory. System, get me a recipe for kebabs. I've roasted countless kebabs over the years. Eating in such a health-conscious manner defeated the purpose of having a late dinner. Recipes will be progressively unlocked. Please maintain a resolute heart as the future god of cookery. For the god of cookery, no dish is beyond his cooking skills, the system replied in a frantic voice. All you do is spout nonsense. Mag pursed his lips. He was already used to that type of useless answer provided by the system, but he couldn't do anything about it. Father, how did you get the shady craftsman to replace the door so quickly? Amy entered the restaurant with amazement on her little face. I know, right? We didn't even see anyone come to install it. Yabimiya also wore a curious expression. She stroked the wooden door, only to find that it was almost identical to the previous one, and had been crafted from the same type of wood. The craftsman was a little shameless, but he was very efficient. He brought the door over and had it installed within 5 minutes, Mag replied with a smile. He poured all of the chicken soup into a large bowl, and asked, how are the 2 dryads? Can they drink chicken soup? They're still very weak, and eating is a little difficult, but they should have no issues drinking chicken soup, Sally replied. When they had gone to visit the dryads, Zixi and Lulu had already awoken. Their injuries were still bothering them a little, so they weren't able to fall asleep again. Then I'll take this chicken soup to them. Mag brought out 2 little bowls and spoons, placing them on a platter along with that large bowl of chicken soup. He held the platter in his hands, and strode out the door. He was quite interested in hearing about how the dryads had died out. The magic potion shop was a little dim as there was only a single oil lamp lit in the corner. Within the spacious hall, there were shelves upon shelves of all types of magic potions, and a layer of black cloth had been draped over the birdcage outside the door. It appeared that Black Coal and Green Pea were already asleep. Master Urian, I'm here to bring them some chicken soup, Mag said to Urian, who was mixing magic potions in front of the counter, as he carried the platter in his hands. Come on in, Urian said without even raising his head. His voice was still quite low and husky. Amy trailed along behind Mag smiling. She asked Urian, Master Turtle, we're having a late dinner tonight. Would you like to join us? Late dinner. Urian's nostrils stirred slightly as he caught a whiff of the alluring aroma of the chicken soup. He swallowed involuntarily, and his gaze fell on the chicken soup in Mag's hands. This is for them. If you don't mind, please come and join us for some food at the restaurant. You've been working hard tonight, so you must be hungry, Mag hurriedly said. Go on. They'll probably go to sleep soon. Urian withdrew his gaze, and continued to swirl the long-necked crystal vial in his hand. The blue liquid and purple liquid within gradually merged together as he did so. Mag carried the platter with chicken soup and walked through the door behind the counter. He arrived in a small room. On the wide shelves that were usually reserved for magic medicinal ointments, there were instead 2 figures lying there. There was a lit oil lamp in the corner, illuminating their pale faces and hands, which were tightly latched onto one another's. Mag, Zixi turned toward the door upon hearing that voice, and her gaze fell on the bowl of chicken soup. Her nose twitched slightly, and her eyes instantly lit up. Even though she was feeling quite weak, she was still filled with anticipation as she asked, "Could it be, that you've brought food for us?" "We sure have. Big Sister Zixi, Father says you're both too weak, and haven't had any dinner, so he brought over some food for you and Big Bear. You can only sleep well after you fill your stomachs," Amy, who strode in through the door, answered in Mag's stead. "I made you some chicken soup." Mag placed the platter onto the table with a smile on his face. He lifted the lid on the bowl, and the alluring scent of chicken soup immediately wafted throughout the entire room. "It smells so good. I love the braised chicken and rice. Mag, you're the best." Zixi's eyes immediately lit up as she attempted to struggle into a sitting position. "Be careful." Yabimiya rushed over and helped her up. After being treated by Sally, the wound on her lower abdomen was essentially healed, but she was still very weak from excessive blood loss. "I was worried that you wouldn't be able to eat anything, so I only cooked some chicken soup, not quite the braised chicken and rice you were referring to." Mag poured 2 bowls of clear transparent chicken soup, and carried them over to the makeshift bed. He passed 1 bowl to Yabimiya, and kept the other. Lulu was riddled with wounds, so it appeared that he would have to be fed. "Mag, you're such a good person." Zixi was very touched, but her eyes were already drawn to the chicken soup in Yabimiya's hands. She turned to look at Lulu, and asked in a beseeching voice, "Can you feed Lulu some soup first? He bled a lot, so he must be very thirsty now." "No. You drink first." "I'm not thirsty. As long as I can watch you drink, I won't feel thirsty at all." Lulu shook his head, and looked at Zixi with a gentle light in his eyes. "No need to sacrifice yourself for the other. You can both drink at once." Mag was only there to deliver some chicken soup, but they were still stuffing dog food down his gullet. The chicken soup that he had cooked on that occasion was less intense in flavor when compared to the chicken soup used for the braised chicken. Yabimiya scooped up a spoonful, and blew on it gently before feeding it to Zixi. "Such delicious chicken soup. It's not as rich as the braised chicken's soup, but its savoriness has not been diluted at all. It doesn't have many ingredients in it, but that only makes the taste of the chicken soup purer." Zixi's eyes immediately lit up. The delectable chicken soup flowed down her throat and into her stomach in a warm stream. Her feebleness instantly diminished significantly as a result, and she could sense that the shriveled world tree was absorbing that peculiar energy. It was as if rain had finally fallen after a prolonged drought, and she was struck by a sense of elation. Her throbbing wound had become warm and a little numb, while the pain was quickly receding. Using chicken soup to nurture the world tree. Will the world tree grow up to be a little strange as a result? Zixi could sense that the world tree within her body was absorbing the energy within the chicken soup with elation, but she was slightly concerned. On the other side, Mag was also feeding Lulu spoonfuls of chicken soup. Compared to Zixi, who had the world tree to protect her, Lulu's injuries were clearly not going to recover anywhere near as quickly. However, after swallowing his first mouthful of chicken soup, his raspy throat was immediately soothed, and a warm sensation spread throughout his entire body. His pain had also been drastically alleviated, and his tightly furrowed brows began to relax. The chicken soup was even more effective than the pain-killing magic potions that Urian had given him. The 2 small bowls of chicken soup were quickly devoured, and Mag stood up to pour more soup for them. "Mag, can I have some meat?" Zixi asked with a pitiable expression. She was staring at the bowl on the table with yearning in her eyes. "Are you sure you can eat meat?" Mag was a little taken aback as he turned toward Zixi. She was struggling to even move just a moment ago, but was requesting to eat meat all of a sudden. "Of course." Zixi's eyes instantly lit up. Her mood seemed to have been lifted significantly, and she nodded in confirmation. "All right, then." Zixi's condition really appeared to have improved quite a bit after drinking the bowl of chicken soup, so he ladled a few chunks of chicken into her bowl. He then passed the bowl to Yabimiya before preparing to fill another bowl for Lulu. Lulu shook his head with a grateful expression as he said determinedly, "I'm full now. Give the rest to her, thank you." "All right." Mag wasn't going to try and dissuade Lulu as he withdrew the bowl in his hand. He was quite appreciative of Lulu's doting love for his lover. After all, there were countless smooth-talking men in the world, but a man who was actually willing to give up his life was very praiseworthy. "Help me up. I can drink a third bowl." After finishing the second bowl of chicken soup, Zixi had recovered some of her mobility. She swallowed the chicken she was chewing, and her expression lit up with excitement. The World Tree was constantly healing her body and replenishing her energy, thereby giving her an extremely high rate of recovery. "Big Sister Zixi, you're a white kitty, so what's your baby going to look like if you have one with Big Bear?" Amy asked Zixi with a curious expression as the latter was preparing to tuck into her third bowl of soup. The dark and foreboding Basti prison was like a massive beast that was lying dormant underground, extending a weirdly shaped horn in the darkness. It was guarding the southwestern corner of Chaos City, and maintaining order in its lawless night. "Lord Brandley, we've already clarified the details of Gabriel's Black Iron Cross serial murders. The first crime took place 3 years ago, when an assistant night test examiner's family of 4 was brutally murdered. 2 years ago, a body was discovered in the sewers in the southern region of the city, and there was a cross carved onto the arm of the body with a knife. 3 months ago, 3 murders took place in Chaos City in quick succession, and the victims included 2 children under 10 years of age. A black iron cross was left behind at all of the crime scenes. In a dimly lit room, there was a man in a black jumpsuit, with a black cloth obscuring his face, revealing only his eyes. Facing Brandley, he had his head slightly bowed in a respectful manner, and reported, "After extensive comparisons, we discovered that the black iron cross that Gabriel was carrying has the same appearance as the ones left on the crime scenes, and is made of an identical material. After raiding Gabriel's residence, we discovered many more of those black iron crosses, as well as a victim's severed limb. We can determine from the aforementioned evidence that he is the serial murderer we are looking for." Brandley nodded, and asked, "Do Deveau and Gudania have anything to do with this? Why did they attack the Mamie restaurant? What were their intentions?" "The 2 of them most likely do not know anything about the string of murders, so at this stage we're almost certain that they have nothing to do with those crimes. However, Boss Deveau of the Deveau Tavern has many underlings that have been involved in shady dealings. 2 years ago, the boss of a winery owed him some money, so he hired Gabriel to give his debtor a brutal beating, resulting in a permanent disability. After that, Deveau took over his winery. There have been many other instances of him hiring thugs to plunder riches from others. On one of those occasions, the victim succumbed to their injuries and died. Gudania's situation is a little better. He only got into an altercation with the Mamie restaurant over a bowl of tofu pudding. He felt like he had been humiliated in the restaurant, and went back with Deveau to start some trouble, only for the subsequent events to occur," the man in black hurriedly replied. "If the Deveau Tavern has committed such atrocious crimes in the past, then why hasn't our Grey Temple done anything about them? They've committed murder." Brandley asked with furrowed brows. "About that, the man in black was a little hesitant. "Tell me," Brandley commanded with a sharp look. "Prior to our investigation, the Deveau Tavern has already been reported to our Grey Temple on many occasions. However, due to some indeterminate reasons, none of those reports were followed up on. The earliest of those reports could be traced back to 3 years ago," the man in black replied in a low voice. "Do we have a spy among our ranks?" Brandley mused. The man in black shook his head, and replied, "We do not have the jurisdictive power to investigate such matters." "All right, I'll report this to the higher UPS," Brandley concluded with a nod. The hierarchy within the Grey Temple was very clear-cut, and without special permission, one couldn't investigate cases that were beyond their jurisdictive powers. That regulation effectively restricted the power of the workers on all levels, but made investigations very difficult at times. After a brief silence, the man in black continued, "Furthermore, during this period of time, someone has attempted to bail out Devo and Gudania. There have also been many attempts made by outsiders to gather information on the case, so even the contents of the confidential fourth-tier incident have most likely already been exposed. Who's trying to bail them out?" Brandley's brows knitted even more tightly together. "People from the Chamber of Commerce," the man in black replied in a faint voice. "They've been becoming more and more invasive of late. They've probably even forgotten their identities." Brandley slowly clenched his fists, and strode toward the door as he said, "Tell Deputy Warden Jonathan that Lord Roland has always kept an eye on Basty." "Yes." The man in black bowed his head deeply to express his utmost respect and admiration. Upon a black palace that was close to 20 meters tall, there were specks of bright light that acted as embellishments, making it appear as if there were stars hanging from its walls. At the very center of the temple was a circular platform that was over 2 meters tall. An elf in a deep blue magician robe stood on the platform, and gently twirled the wand in her hand. Specks of blue light emerged from the tip of the wand before falling upon those stars, making them even more dazzling. She was an elf of indeterminate age, with a plain set of features. Despite that, she gave off an incomparably regal air. Her face was expressionless as she looked up at the countless stars overhead as if she were surveying the seeds that she had sown. At the very center was the largest and brightest star. None of the other stars dared to approach it, let alone compete with its radiance and glory. However, there was a large star slightly further away that seemed to be on the rise. It wasn't as bright as the largest star, but it was more dazzling than the stars around it. There was a hunched old hag with a hooked nose standing at the foot of the platform, and she was absolutely furious. She sharply screeched, "Mistress Helena, that filthy Irina is jeopardizing the future that you picked for us elves. Her heinous crimes are punishable by death. She is a fallen one renounced by the gods, and has had her body soiled by a mortal, *tch who has birthed a half-breed. How dare she show such arrogance and insolence?" "Silence! The princess is not someone that you can insult," the elf on the platform responded in an indifferent voice. A black leather whip flew through the air before striking the old hag's face, issuing a crisp sound which reverberated throughout the palace. The hunched old woman was sent flying, and only managed to arrest her momentum after crashing into a stone pillar. She got up unsteadily, using the pillar for support. Only half of her face was swollen, but it had completely swelled up. She looked up at Helena with horror and befuddlement as she said in a trembling voice, "Mistress Helena, did I say something wrong? If our brethren were to hear about what she has done, then how would she be able to live with herself? How would she be able to continue to occupy the seat of life and be hailed as our princess?" "You're right. Irina has indeed done something that brings shame on us elves. She has allowed herself to be soiled by a human, and has been abandoned by the gods." Helena turned to Hetty, and the black whip instantly wound itself around her neck before lifting her off her feet. She was brought level with Helena, upon which the latter shook her head, and said, "But if word of this were to spread, it would tarnish the reputation of us elves, making us the laughingstock of the entire Norland continent. Only a handful of people know about this, and we must keep it that way. You must never reveal this secret, or I might just kill you right now to make sure that you don't get to tell anyone." Hetty looked at Helena with horror and reverence in her eyes. She could sense an aura of death coming from the whip that was tightening around her neck, and that pain was being inflicted upon her by the very same Mistress Helena whom she had served for several hundred years and frenetically worshipped. She hurriedly nodded before the whip could snap her neck. "Remember this, prior to the emergence of a new princess, Irina will remain the only princess of the elves. You should watch yourself." Helena lifted a finger, and the whip around Hetty's neck was withdrawn, upon which she fell to the ground with a thump. She lay sprawled on the ground with a face pressed tightly against the ground, and gasped, "Yes. I will, abide by her wishes, and allow Snare to return safely." Helena looked up at the brightest star in the sky. A smile appeared on her face as she mused in a faint voice, if they're really still alive, then I'm very curious to see what that little guy has become. Find them. After hearing Amy's question about reproduction between a white cat and a black bear, the first thing that sprang to Mag's mind was obviously Gun 1. It was an adorable creature that could feed itself just by acting cute all day. It could be said that it was the most leisurely and carefree animal in the world. However, at their core, Zixi and Lulu were still dryads. They only became a bear and a white cat, respectively, after their transformation. As for whether their baby would transform into a panda or not, that was not something Mag could be sure of. From a theoretical standpoint, they satisfied all of the prerequisites for that to happen. As for whether their genes would facilitate the birth of a panda, that was something that he was looking forward to seeing. Zixi faltered slightly upon hearing that question. She then turned to Lulu, and a warm smile appeared on her face as she replied, Lulu says he's going to have many babies with me. We'll have bear babies and cat babies so we can have the best of both worlds. Then, after you give birth, can I play with your babies? Amy's looked at Zixi with an expectant gaze. Of course they can play with little Amy. You'll be their big sister, Zixi replied with a smile. She was also looking forward to that day. Zixi soon finished her third bowl of soup, and ate half a bowl of chicken as well. Faint green light began to shimmer from her lower abdomen, and her face returned to its normal color. Mag, Amy, Aisha, and Yabimiya, I am truly grateful to all of you for saving Lulu and myself. Zixi supported herself using the counter, and extended a bow of gratitude. It wasn't much, don't mention it. Mag shook his head with a smile. Don't worry, big sister Zixi. If any more bad people turn up, Amy will chase them away, Amy promised with her hands clenched into little fists. That's right. We all think that you two are good people, while the werewolves are bad people, so it's only right for us to help you, Yabimiya chimed in as she nodded. Sally merely nodded, and didn't say anything. She was looking at Zixi's lower abdomen with a hint of surprise in her eyes. Earlier, when she was administering treatment to Zixi, she had discovered that there was something in Zixi's body that could absorb life magic. That entity was completely different in nature compared to life magic, but somehow was a little similar, and she found it quite intriguing. There was even a period of time when she had thought that she was hallucinating. However, she sensed the very same aura from that green light. Zixi had been severely wounded, but was able to recover and move about so quickly, that strange type of magic energy clearly played a major role in that process. The chicken soup was very delicious and nourishing, but it was still inferior to actual medicine. Lulu, let me feed you some chicken soup. You have to drink some more so you can get well soon. Zixi slowly made her way over to Lulu with a bowl of soup in her hands. Zixi appeared to be close to a full recovery, and Lulu was very relieved. He shook his head with a doting smile, and said, You drink it. It's much more satisfying for me to watch you drink. No, if you won't drink it, then I won't drink it, either. Zixi pouted as she shook her head. She blew gently on a spoonful of chicken soup before bringing it over to his lips, and she smiled as she said, You drink the soup and I'll eat the chicken. That way, we'll be able to finish this entire bowl of soup. Let's go have some dinner. Otherwise, we'll all be stuffed full of dog food soon. Mag picked up Amy and strode out the door. Yabimiya and Sally trailed along silently behind them. The dryad couple had just survived a massive ordeal, and it was best to give them some privacy. Lulu looked into Zixi's eyes, and caressed her face with his hand. He was feeling very self-critical as he said, Zixi, I'm so useless. I wasn't able to protect you. Who told you that? Lulu is my hero. There is no one better than Lulu in this world, nor is there anyone who loves and adores me as much as Lulu. Zixi countered vehemently. You adore me like a child, while I adore you like a hero. After inviting Urian over for a late dinner, Sally used her magic to wash the dishes before departing with Yabimiya. Their busy day had finally drawn to a conclusion. Mag locked the door and closed the blinds after they left. Amy was herding Ugly Duckling as they ran laps in the restaurant, and Mag looked at them with a warm smile on his face. He wasn't in a hurry to go upstairs. Instead, he sat down in a chair to watch them. Meow! Ugly Duckling cried for help. It had only nibbled on 2 mouthfuls of braised chicken, but was now being forced to run 10 laps in the restaurant. That was physical torture. Mag chose to ignore it as he looked at Amy with a doting smile. She was currently wielding a little leather whip as she followed Ugly Duckling, hot on its trails. It was much more important to him that his little girl had a fun time. After finishing the 10 laps, Amy picked up the exhausted Ugly Duckling in her arms, and gently stroked its head as she said, "You're such a good little kitty. That's 10 laps for today, you have to keep this up tomorrow as well." Ugly Duckling immediately fainted in her arms upon hearing that. "Let's go upstairs. It's time for bed. You have to go to Master Urian for lessons tomorrow. The lessons start at 7:30, so you can sleep in a little." Mag turned off the lights, and carried the 2 little fellas upstairs. Amy was tucked in after brushing her teeth. She turned to Mag, and asked, "Father, the principal is really powerful. Will I become as powerful as him in the future?" "Of course. As long as you study hard under the tutelage of Master Urian and Master Krasu, you'll become an even better magic caster than Principal Novan." Mag nodded with a smile. She had inherited the bloodlines of a 10th tier knight and a 10th tier elven magic caster. Furthermore, she was being taught magic by 2 10th tier magic casters, so she really did have an immeasurably bright future ahead of her. "I want to be a super magic caster." Amy closed her eyes with elation, and soon fell asleep. "Before you become a super magic caster, let me protect you." Mag planted a gentle kiss on her forehead, and adjusted her blanket before turning to leave. At the same time, he said internally, "System, I want to buy a sword." The system can provide countless choices. There are long swords, daggers, claymores, rapiers. "You name it, I have it," the system replied as if it were a salesman. "The same sword as last time will do, but I have a condition," Mag interjected in a calm voice. "Please specify." "As my strength increases, I'll have to constantly change to different swords." "You have to repurchase the swords that I discard," Mag said with a serious expression. "You're being unreasonable. The system creates custom-made swords, and those swords will only be a perfect match for you. They'll be useless after I repurchase them, so there's no way I'd be able to sell them again." "I refuse," the system grumbled. "The repurchase price will be half of the selling price. Trust me, with my rate of progression, this will only be a profitable deal for you." Mag smiled nonchalantly as he said, "You have to realize that we have an arms shop next door. I can order a custom-made longsword high in quality for 1,000 gold coins there, and it won't be very difficult for me to sell it for 500 later on." In the arms market, supply exceeded demand, so buyers held the ascendancy. He was using that against the system, which allowed him to gain the upper hand in their negotiation. From his past experience, that was quite an effective bartering method. "Deal." Ding! 1,000 gold coins have been successfully deducted. The longsword is complete, and can be delivered at any time. The system was still a little indignant, but it had no choice but to comply. "Deliver it now. Place the sword by the door to the balcony." A faint smile appeared on Mag's face as he changed into a set of loose clothes from his wardrobe before making his way to the balcony. Opening the door, he discovered that there was a long sword waiting for him on the balcony. It was identical to the one that he had used on that mission in the Valley of Thorns. After he was almost impaled by the sword falling from the sky, Mag had completely lost confidence in the system's postage and handling. As such, he decided to be more careful this time in order to avoid repeating that harrowing ordeal. Mag picked up the sword, and found that the hilt was slightly cool to the touch. It weighed about 2.5 kilograms, and felt a little heavy, but it wasn't cumbersome in any way. He twirled the sword in his hand, and its blade shimmered with a cold gleam under the moonlight. He gently closed the balcony door, and took a deep breath. His mind became extremely serene, and he adopted a very serious expression. The days of constant cooking in recent times had brought about many changes for Mag. The most prominent of those was that he had learned how to concentrate on one thing, as well as how to get in the zone in a short period of time. After experiencing death, he began to understand what was truly important to him. His black long sword blended into the darkness of the night. He abruptly stepped forward and thrust his sword out. It was a very simple sword strike. There were no embellishments or fancy tricks, it was just a plain and simple thrust. However, his sword traveled in an extremely straight trajectory. The tip, blade, and hilt of the sword, as well as his wrist and forearm, were all on the same parallel line, without even the slightest discrepancy. It was as if everything had been measured using the most accurate ruler. The thrust was invariably straight, and unavoidably quick. Mag withdrew his sword before repeating the same motion expressionlessly. It was still the exact same sword strike that was unleashed previously. The angle, speed, and even his hand's position were all completely identical. On the balcony of the third floor, Mag stood under the moonlight, and unleashed one sword thrust after another. Each strike seemed to be completely identical, but also somehow different at the same time. The bland and boring motion appeared to be effortless, but Mag's clothes were soon drenched with sweat. Despite that, every single thrust was still straight and true, with impeccable speed and trajectory. 98, 99, 100, after unleashing the final strike, Mag retracted his hand, which was slightly numb by that point. He exhaled, the numbing sensation crept along his fingers, all the way up to his right shoulder. However, his eyes were particularly bright, and he seemed to be reminiscing about something as he fixed his gaze on the sword in his hand. 13 swordplay forms, all of which are plain yet effective killing techniques. First form, straight thrust. When completely mastered, its unchanging form can combat anything that the enemy throws my way. This is the true way of the sword, Mag murmured to himself. That was a sword technique that Mag Alex had practiced for over 10 years. The first 5 forms were the most basic sword strikes, consisting of a thrust, jab, swipe, slam, and slash. Each of those motions had been practiced tens of thousands of times by Mag Alex, and they were all deeply ingrained in his muscle memory. A portion of Mag's body had already recovered, so what he had to do was to redevelop himself, and tap into the maximal extent of his current potential, thereby completely mastering his body's abilities. Progression in power was a slow and steady process. If Mag wanted to become stronger, he would have to train differently from everyone else. The system had given him a body that had once reached the pinnacle of human ability, offering him strength points afterwards so he could slowly tap into his body's latent potential. Furthermore, there were powerful sword techniques and combat tactics in his memory. Those factors gave Mag a very high starting point as well as limitless potential. However, he was still Mag, and not Alex. It was just like how the system had prepared the best kitchen and ingredients for Mag, then injected the most premium recipes and experience bag into his mind. If he wanted to cook the most perfect dish, he still had to practice countless times in the test field for the god of cookery. In doing so, he would convert someone else's experience into something that he fully mastered, thereby allowing him to use the best ingredients to cook the best dishes. He was facing the same problem in his quest to get stronger. He had the most powerful body as well as the most applicable cultivation methods and experience in his mind, but he had to make all of that his own. Of course, that was something that Mag had become very proficient at. Something that could be achieved through relentless hard work was not difficult to him. He didn't back down when he trained night and day without any sleep in the test field for the god of cookery, so practicing sword techniques for 1 to 2 hours every night was nothing to him. He transferred his sword over to his left hand, and continued to practice the same thrusting motion. His movements were impeccable and fast, even more so than when he was performing them with his right hand. Everyone on the Norland continent knew that Mag Alex's sword strikes were very fast when using his right hand, but there were also many who knew that his left hand was even faster. However, most of those who knew about the latter were already dead. On that night 3 years ago, Mag Alex had been ambushed by 6 10th tier powerhouses. He had managed to kill 3 of them, and he used his left hand during that battle. Mag practiced his sword technique diligently as he thought to himself, "It's a pity that I can't use essential energy before reaching the 5th tier." He flicked through the powerful sword techniques in his mind, and was very eager to give them a try. Essential energy was similar in nature to the internal energy that was often mentioned in Wuxia 1 novels. Humans were the weakest among all species when first born, but they were able to rank among the 8 species that ruled over the continent. The key lay in their ability to awaken essential energy, and invent ways to cultivate. Thus, the frail humans were able to combat the likes of the giant dragons and demons. Essential energy cultivation elevated the upper limit of the human body's capabilities, allowing both speed and power to be enhanced as essential energy increased. After reaching the 5th tier, essential energy could be used in conjunction with battle techniques, thereby drastically improving one's combat prowess. A 50-meter-long saber projection was perhaps a little far-fetched, but a sword projection that was 3 to 5 meters in length was certainly not an exaggeration. Once upon a time, when Mag Alex was at the pinnacle of the 10th tier, he had unleashed a sword projection that was 12 meters in length, and slain a dragon with a single strike. Just imagining being able to vanquish a fireball with a sword strike instilled him with a sense of excitement. That was the true world of swords and magic that Mag had envisioned. Of course, Mag didn't even have any essential energy yet, so there was no point in thinking about sword projections. However, as he accumulated more strength points, his essential energy should be able to slowly recover. With the enhancement effects of essential energy, humans would be capable of doing many things that were once impossible to them. Back then, the purple-striped griffin had been an important factor in Alex's dragon-slaying quest. However, the key was to strengthen one's body through the use of essential energy. With a powerful sword technique as accompaniment, essential energy could unleash devastating power. It would allow one to slice through a giant dragon's hard scales with ease, thereby inflicting grievous wounds upon them. Back then, the purple-striped griffin, and the man who wielded his sword with a single arm, struck fear deep into the hearts of the giant dragons. The giant dragons were the kings of the sky, but there was actually a time when none of them could be seen in the air above Rodu. Battle techniques were methods of utilizing essential energy during battle. Only battle techniques could unleash the full power of essential energy, thereby resulting in a marked improvement in one's combat prowess. The last 5 forms of the 13 swordplay forms were actually sword techniques, so they could only be used after he reached the 5th tier. Mag shook his head to rid himself of those unnecessary thoughts, and continued to focus on his sword practice. He wasn't even a 1st tier knight yet, so sword techniques were things that he only had to think about in the distant future. His current priority was to practice his sword forms, and make himself invincible among beings of the same tier. That would construct a good foundation for him to improve upon in the future. The practice session lasted an entire hour, and Mag was well and truly drenched in sweat by the end thereof. His wrists were throbbing as he put his sword away in a safe place, and he went downstairs to take a bath. A short while later, Mag lay down in a warm bath and closed his eyes in contentment. After an hour of painstaking practice, he had unleashed the sword strike 200 times with each hand, which gave him a better understanding of and control over his body. After reaching his exhaustion threshold, he was able to clearly identify his body's tenacity as well as its potential for improvement. Of course, an hour was definitely not enough. Mag had already formulated a training schedule that centered around progressive overload for himself. He was going to gradually increase the duration and intensity of his training sessions, which would take place at night, after Amy had already gone to bed. She's progressing in her cultivation at a phenomenal rate, I can't let her leave me in the dust. That would be way too embarrassing, Mag murmured to himself as he clenched his fists tightly. His heart was filled with unprecedented motivation. That night, Mag slept very soundly. However, he wasn't awoken by his alarm clock the next morning. Instead, he was jerked awake by a dull thump in a shaky bed. Mag opened his bleary eyes, but he immediately snapped awake at the sight of the drawing that was hanging from his bed frame, which was oscillating from side to side. He threw off his blankets and threw himself to Amy's little bed. It was an earthquake. Right at that moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Beep, beep, beep. Warning! The restaurant is under attack. The energy level is at the 3rd tier, and it has yet to break through the restaurant's defense systems. 3rd tier. Mag stopped cold in his tracks. The tremors had already stopped. There was no damage aside from the fact that his alarm clock had been knocked over, and the drawing on his bed frame was completely crooked. However, the restaurant had been completely unmoved when it had last been struck by a 3rd tier attack, so he was a little perplexed. System, is someone trying to cause trouble again? He asked. Unable to identify the identity of the intruder or the method of attack used, the system replied in an indifferent voice. Mag looked at the alarm clock on his table, which told him that it was only 5 a.m. Amy was still sound asleep on her little bed with Ugly Duckling in her arms. He heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing that. He put on some clothes, and quietly went downstairs. Even though a 3rd tier attack wouldn't be able to break through the restaurant's defense, it was still a little concerning that they were being attacked out of the blue. As such, Mag decided to assess the situation himself. He opened a set of blinds and looked outside. The sky was still quite dim, and there were no people in the streets. The melee that had taken place the day prior had destroyed the restaurant's door as well as a few large trees outside. People from the Grey Temple were presumably going to visit later in the day to replant those trees. There's no one there. Was it a prank? Mag looked around and confirmed that there was no one hiding in the bushes, either. He became more and more perplexed, and hesitated momentarily before opening the door. His feet remained planted within the restaurant as he poked his head out and surveyed his surroundings. His gaze then fell on the forge next door, upon which his eyes widened. He exclaimed, "Mabai, what happened to you?" The forge had already been reduced to a pile of rubble. Mabai held a large iron hammer in his hand, and his face had been blackened by soot as he sat at the entrance of the forge. Most of his disheveled beard had been burned away, and he looked like a coal miner who had just returned from a shift. "Hee, morning, Mag. I accidentally caused an explosion, but it's all right." Mabai turned to Mag, and gave him an awkward smile. "It's all right." Mag was a little skeptical as he came out of his restaurant. The forge had been razed to the ground, and all types of weapons were scattered throughout the wreckage. The neighboring shop where no one lived had also been destroyed, and even the shop that was situated an entire block away had collapsed. The situation certainly didn't look all right. It was possible to imagine just how terrifying an explosion it had been. A peculiar expression appeared on Mag's face. "An accidental explosion? This is a bloody terrorist attack." Mabai was still sitting amid the wreckage with a bashful smile on his face. Mag then suddenly figured out where his neighbor had disappeared to for the past couple of days. He had been experimenting with explosives underground. If Mag wasn't mistaken, the tremors he had felt in the Mamie restaurant were most likely a result of that explosion. In the face of a 3rd tier attack, the Mamie restaurant would have most likely been toppled like the nearby shops had it not been for the restaurant's defense systems. He and Amy were still sleeping there, so the consequences would have been dire had they not have been protected by the system. "Mabai, what you're doing is not right. What if that explosion had topped the restaurant? If you're going to do experiments, at least notify your neighbors first." Mag was a little angry as he appraised Mabai. He was very sympathetic toward his blacksmith neighbor as the latter's father had been eaten by a giant dragon, but that wasn't an excuse for him to experiment with explosives at home. Furthermore, Mabai hadn't given any prior notice to his neighbors before conducting his experiments. He was clearly not taking the lives of others seriously, and that lackadaisical attitude left a bad taste in Mag's mouth. Mabai stood up with an apologetic expression, and replied, "Sorry, Mag, I didn't think that the explosion would be so powerful. I used similar ratios of materials for many experiments in the past, and the resulting explosions were only able to blast through the first layer of the magic shields. I only added a pinch of powdered beast core this time. I didn't think it would make such a drastic difference. I had set up 3 layers of magic shields in advance, but it still wasn't enough." Mabai's apology was very sincere, and he did appear to have taken appropriate measures prior to the experiment. He had set up 3 magic shields, and kept the dosage of materials the same, but he had added some powdered beast core? An explosion of that caliber was impossible to set off without a sufficient amount of explosives. From the crater at the center of the forge, it could be deduced that Mabai had been conducting his experiment at least 500 meters below the ground. The fact that the explosion was still able to cause such massive damage despite occurring so deep underground was a testament to its power. The explosives created by Mabai were clearly incapable of producing such devastating effects, which indicated that the powdered beast core that he had added was crucial. Even so, I hope you can avoid doing these experiments at home in the future. I have a responsibility to keep Amy and my customers safe." Mag nodded in response. He could accept Mabai's explanation, but he couldn't allow Mabai to keep doing those dangerous experiments so close to the restaurant. "I will. After what happened today, I wouldn't dare to continue doing these experiments at home." Mabai nodded apologetically before rubbing his hands together with excitement, and continued, "Speaking of which, I seem to have found a way to enhance the power of the explosions. Adding just a small pinch of powdered beast core has already increased its power more than 1,000-fold. If I add even more, won't my explosives pose a threat even to giant dragons?" After coming to an understanding with Mabai, Mag's expression eased significantly. As long as he didn't do those experiments at home, Mag didn't care what he did. Furthermore, he was also quite interested in finding ways to enhance the power of explosions. After all, he was living in a dangerous world, and he still couldn't get that RPG from the system. Perhaps he could create explosives of his own to defend himself. Just thinking about being able to set up 2 RPGs outside the restaurant struck him with an indescribable sense of excitement. Gunpowder hadn't even been invented in the alternate world yet, but Mabai had created a bomb that was even more terrifying than TNT. Mag couldn't help but feel a hint of admiration toward Mabai. Could it be that he was the legendary hexplosives expert one? If you have enough quantity and can compress the energy, it may be able to bring down a giant dragon. Mag nodded, and contemplated momentarily before continuing, "But if your target is a giant dragon, I suggest that you focus on using compression to increase energy density rather than solely focus on increasing the power output. Then, create something that could launch your explosives as a projectile so the explosion can take place right beside the giant dragon." "What would I be able to use to launch my explosives?" Mabai asked as his eyes immediately lit up. It was a problem that had been bothering him for a long time. He turned an expectant gaze toward Mag, hoping that he would provide an answer. "A cannon," Mag replied. "Cannon?" Mabai was confused. "Yes, a cannon, something that can shoot a projectile toward a giant dragon." Mag nodded. "Warning. What you're doing is very dangerous. It is very possible that your actions will drastically increase the development of the Norland continent, resulting in abnormal development of this entire world." The system's stern voice sounded. System: gunpowder was invented in the Tang dynasty. Even though it was used in some subsequent battles, it only managed to replace bows and arrows 1,000 years down the track. Don't accuse me of trying to change the world, those accusations are completely unwarranted. Mag pursed his lips before continuing, "Besides, I didn't invent gunpowder in this world. This guy has already invented TNT. I can only marvel at a prodigy like him. The system fell silent. Is there really something like that? What is this cannon thing? Mabai couldn't help but take a couple of steps toward Mag. His eyes were shimmering with excitement. What Mag was proposing was something that resonated deeply with him. A cannon is a projectile launching device. However, it is only a theoretical construct that exists in my mind. It's yet to be decided whether it can be replicated in real life. Mag shook his head with a smile. Then, can you tell me about it? I'm in desperate need of something like that. If it's feasible, I'm happy to pay you for the idea. Mabai stared at Mag with an intense light in his eyes. I'm not in need of money. It's just that there have been people who have been causing trouble for the restaurant recently. If you succeed in creating a weapon that can take out giant dragons, can you craft one for me and set it up in front of my restaurant so I can intimidate others? Mag asked with a smile. Of course. If I do succeed, that won't be a problem at all. Mabai faltered momentarily before nodding. I haven't thought through it very well yet, but perhaps it can provide some inspiration to you. Come and have a seat in my restaurant. Mag nodded before turning toward his restaurant. Mabai looked down at his blackened clothes and hands, and he shook his head as he refused. I think I'll have to pass on that offer for now. I've already called some people to come over and repair the shops. Plus, I've got dirt all over me, and your restaurant will open soon. I don't want to negatively impact your business. That's all right. Come on in. The staff will clean up the restaurant before we open. There are some things that I can only explain to you through the use of diagrams. Mag continued to walk toward the restaurant without even turning his head. Mabai hesitated momentarily before trailing along behind him. Wash your face and hands first. Mag emerged from the kitchen with a basin filled with water. Thank you. Mabai could sense that Mag had been repressing his rage the entire time, but that anger seemed to have transformed into respect and a hint of admiration. Mag carried away the basin of water, which had turned black, and brought out a cup of water for Mabai. He then placed some paper and a pen on the table. He sat down in a chair, and smiled as he said to Mabai, "Have some water. What I'm about to elaborate on next will be a little complex, so just take in as much as you can. In any case, it'll be too early for you to worry about making cannons before you make your explosives more stable." Explosives? Mabai took a sip of water before turning a perplexed gaze toward Mag. Mag immediately came to the realization that the term explosives didn't yet exist in that world. Thus, he smiled, and asked, "What do you plan on calling that exploding thing that you created today?" When you put it that way, explosives isn't a bad name. Mabai thought carefully about it before nodding. All right, we'll call it explosives for now. A cannon is something that uses gunpowder to create powerful propulsion force in a sealed space. That force will launch the compressed explosive through a barrel, creating an explosion in the end. Mag drew a few diagrams on the paper before pointing to the barrel, and seriously said, "So this is roughly what it would look like. Is this the legendary cannon?" Mabai stared at the diagram for a long time before looking up at Mag with a peculiar expression on his face. No matter how he thought about it, it didn't look very legitimate. He couldn't imagine how that thing was supposed to be capable of launching a projectile. Mag was also a little speechless as he looked down at his own diagrams. He hadn't drawn anything in many years, and his skills had become very rusty. That cannon diagram really wasn't all that great. This is just a rough sketch. Let me give you some details on how it's supposed to work. Mag remained calm and collected as he turned the page. From there onward, he drew his diagrams with much more focus. The diagrams that Mag was drawing were of the simplest cannon imaginable. There was no aiming mechanism or wheels, and it used the simplest front-loading method. It was basically just a cannon barrel supported by a frame. The concept was very simple to understand, and it would be relatively easier to create one as well. Of course, the main limiting factor was that Mag didn't know much about cannons himself, so he wouldn't be able to draw any complex sketches. However, he was familiar with the mechanisms of firearms. The only problem was that firearms were a lot more difficult to create compared to cannons. There was an extremely high degree of precision required, and crafting a powerful gun or rifle was far more complex than creating a powerful cannon. It was best to learn to walk before trying to run. Mag had once been able to draw internal combustion engines from scratch, so after getting serious, drawing a diagram of a crude cannon was a piece of cake for him. The concept behind a cannon is actually very simple, but it's imperative that a sealed space is made for the explosives in order to create the most propulsion force. The instantaneous power unleashed by the explosion will determine whether it can kill a giant dragon. As for the specific details, Mag elaborated on the mechanism of a cannon to complement his diagrammatic explanation. Mabai was very skeptical at first, but his eyes gradually lit up. His expression became more and more reverent as he looked at Mag, and it was as if he had discovered a brand new continent. So that's about it. The key to the cannon is its structural integrity. That determines its range. You're a blacksmith, so you should know more about that than I do. Mag put down his pen. There were already 3 exemplary cannon diagrams on the sheet of paper laid out in front of him, complete with annotations. Mag, you must be a genius. Mabai stared at the diagrams for a while before looking up at Mag with reverence in his eyes. Mag's cooking skills had already conquered his stomach, and now, he had been won over by Mag's brilliant mind. Inventing such powerful explosives had been a pleasant surprise, but he didn't know how to use them. However, Mag pointed out a feasible direction for him. Using the powerful propulsion force of exploding gunpowder to launch projectiles, a barrel to create a sealed space, and a guiding structure to give the projectiles proper direction. What kind of genius could think of those ideas? I'm not a genius, I just have a bit more knowledge in these areas. Mag shook his head with a smile. It appeared that Mabai had understood the ideas that he was trying to convey. As for what type of cannon he would be able to create, that was not something for Mag to worry about. The process was most likely going to be a long and arduous one, with many failed prototypes along the way. Furthermore, none of this could go ahead before the issue of the instability of the explosives was rectified. As a man who could create bullets on his own, Mag was actually quite interested in explosives. However, using powdered beast cores to enhance the power of explosives was completely outside his realm of expertise. Thus, Mag refrained from making suggestions. If he were left to his own devices, perhaps he would be able to create some sort of super terrifying explosives. They were living in an alternate world, after all, and bullets made using normal gunpowder probably couldn't even hurt the ordinary monsters here. A powerful fire-type magic caster was more effective than a normal cannon, so cannons were almost redundant unless an extremely devastating one could be made. The beast core bomb that Mabai had unintentionally invented opened Mag's eyes to certain possibilities. Regardless of whether cannons or firearms were used, as long as the explosives were powerful enough, they could perhaps really pose a threat to giant dragons. Everything has to be crafted in one piece, and it must be able to withstand the force of the explosion from earlier. That won't be easy to create, but I'll be sure to look into it. Mabai picked up the diagrams on the table, and extended a gesture of gratitude toward Mag. Mag shook his head with a smile before issuing another reminder, "No need to thank me. Just remember not to conduct your experiments at home anymore. Otherwise, I won't feel safe as your neighbor." As Mabai continued with his experiments, his bombs would only become more and more powerful. Mag didn't want to die in one of those explosions in his sleep one day. "I'll make sure not to do it ever again." Mabai hurriedly waved his hands. Right at that moment, a loud voice erupted outside. "Mabai? Are you still alive?" Mabai took a glance at the door, and an apologetic expression appeared on his face as he said, "Those must be the people who are here to fix the shops. I have to go now, Mag. I really do apologize for what happened today." "No problem." Mag nodded. Mabai was his neighbor and the first customer at his restaurant, so Mag didn't want to be overly critical toward him. A magic cannon should be very interesting. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at Mabai's departing figure. He was looking forward to seeing one of Mabai's cannons blast a giant dragon out of the sky. Mag picked up the notepad and glass on the table before making his way toward the kitchen. He put on his apron, and began to prepare the ingredients required for the breakfast service. As soon as he gripped his knife, a numbing sensation shot up the fingers on his right hand, extending all the way to his right shoulder. The high-intensity training that he had put himself through the night prior was still bothering him a little. However, it had clearly been beneficial to him as his reflexes and reaction speed had both improved. After chopping up some ingredients, Mag's hands suddenly came to a still. He looked at the knife in his hand, then down at the chicken drumstick on the chopping board, and thought to himself, I spend the majority of my waking hours chopping ingredients and cooking dishes. Every single motion is repeated countless times, so if I can incorporate my sword practice into this, won't I be killing two birds with one stone? Mag took half a step back, and chanted in a light voice, slash. He swung his knife down, and the chicken drumstick was cut in half, with an extremely clean and even incision. However, a faint groove had also been sliced into the chopping board. Not bad, but I need to learn to control my power output. Mag nodded to himself before repeating the same motion. He gradually began to speed up, and the drumstick was sliced into small cubes beneath the blade of his knife. At the same time, he was constantly adjusting the angle and power of his strikes, slowly gaining greater proficiency over time. He also began to execute his movements more and more quickly, and before long, he had become so fast that one could only see a burst of golden light flash past before an entire drumstick was sliced into even cubes. Today is the first day that the Aiden Square food competition will be released. I wonder if some good new restaurants will appear on the poll. That poll is just there to swindle those foodies who aren't regulars here. The top 10 hasn't changed for 3 years, and even the top 30 has always consisted of the same restaurants. It's just a formality at this point, so there's really no point in looking at it. Exactly. Even the top 30 has remained completely unchanged for the past few months, let alone the top 10. I went to the trouble of dining at all of the top 30 restaurants, only to discover afterward that many of them are actually inferior to those ranked outside the top 50. It's getting worse year by year. About 2 decades ago, the Aiden Square food competition was actually worth consulting. All the restaurants that can make it onto the poll are worth having a taste, and the ones in the top 10 all serve top-of-the-range cuisine. At the very least, people were satisfied with the rankings given, and felt them to be justified, but now. Sigh, there were many people gathered in front of the central magic screen in the Aiden Square. All of them were waiting for the updated rankings to be broadcast at 7 a.m. Most of them were foodies who wanted to see if there were going to be any new restaurants, but there were also restaurant employees who had been sent there by their bosses. A server wore a fawning smile on his face as he stood beside a middle-aged man in a set of long pork belly-colored robes. The server asked, "Boss, our Ricky's rotisserie should still be in the top 30, right?" "Of course. Our Ricky's rotisserie has occupied number 30 on the Aiden Square food competition for 3 consecutive months. Our food is adored by our customers, and this time, our goal is not just the 30th spot. We are going for 29th this time." Ricky replied with a smug voice. He intentionally raised his voice by an octave, and the triumphant smile on his face grew even wider as he sensed the envious gazes being directed toward him. As a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, Ricky's rotisserie was guaranteed a spot in the top 30. Even though he had to spend a lot of money to secure that position, the customers it brought to his store resulted in far more profit than expenditure. Following 2 consecutive months in the top 30, profits had already doubled for the rotisserie, and if they were to claim the 29th spot, their profits would be sure to rise again. With that money, they would be able to purchase the shop next to them and expand the restaurant. His business had been stagnant for 10 years, but there was finally hope. That was the nature of business. In the Aden Square, it was very difficult for a restaurant to stand out with great food alone. The effect of the Aden Square food competition wasn't as pronounced as it once had been, but restaurants which claimed spots in the top 30 still benefited greatly. Of course, the rankings had pretty much become a money-making tool for the Chamber of Commerce. Aside from few traditional stalwarts, the rest of the top 50 were all board members of the Chamber of Commerce. Competition for the rankings was very fierce every month, and that was also just a part of business. Look at those idiots. They take so much care when placing their votes, but what does it matter? Will good food really secure a high ranking? The system is no longer the same as it was 2 decades ago. Ricky looked at the expectant customers around him with a hint of a mocking sneer on his face. He looked at all of the workers who were busy gathering statistics, and raised his chin proudly. He was brimming with confidence. Arvin prodded Rude, and asked, "Rude, what rank do you that restaurant will claim?" "In my heart, the top 4 spots should all belong to Mamie Restaurant." Rude paused momentarily before continuing, "However, the scale of his restaurant and his attitude toward cuisine will limit the number of votes he receives. Perhaps 1 or 2 of his dishes will make it into the top 50. Top 50 on the first try? Is the food really that good?" Arvin was a little surprised. Even though both of them were workers, no one knew what the results would be until the votes were tallied. "I strongly suggest you go taste their rujiamo and sweet tofu pudding. Even though it's a bit expensive, the exquisite flavor is well worth the price," Rude suggested with a smile. "All right, seeing as you're constantly going on about how good their food is, I'll be sure to pay them a visit this month after I get paid." Arvin nodded with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. One had to realize that Deputy President Robert very rarely gave his critique on a restaurant's food. However, he had advocated for the savory tofu pudding the day prior. "Jay, what rank do you think Mamie Restaurant will claim?" Harrison was trying his best to force open his eyes, which had been squashed into a narrow slit by his flabby face, as he attempted to find Mamie Restaurant on the rankings. Just from their food alone, they should dominate the top 5. However, there are many other factors at play, so it's hard to say. "Perhaps they'll make it into the top 30, Jay mused. As veteran foodies of the Aden Square, they were well past the stage where they relied on the rankings to find good food. However, they had voted for Mamie Restaurant the day prior, so they stopped by to have a look. The restaurant would only open at 7:30 anyway, so they could take a quick glance at the rankings, and have something to talk about when lining up for food. Many more of the gathered spectators also had the same idea in mind. Even they didn't quite understand why they cared so much about a particular restaurant's ranking. Jay was a little angry as he exclaimed, 30? If they don't make it into the top 10, then I'll use my foot to cast votes from now on. The rankings have become more and more unsightly in the past few days. If you want to find a good restaurant, you have to start looking below number 50. However, that doesn't really matter now. Mamie Restaurant is enough for me, I'm not sure I could stomach another restaurant's food ever again. Don't let the other restaurant owners hear you say that. Otherwise, they'll give you a thorough beating." Jay chuckled. He looked at the restaurants on the rankings, and couldn't help but shake his head. Aside from the few aforementioned traditional stalwarts, many of the high-ranking restaurants could only talk the talk, but not walk the walk. Their food couldn't even compare to the one of the restaurants that were ranked below 50. "It's almost time." A voice suddenly erupted in the crowd. Everyone raised their heads upon hearing that, and turned their attention to the first magic screen. The top 30 would appear on that screen, and those restaurants would also be printed on the first page of the Delicious Cuisine magazine, which was released by the Food Association. Ricky had a wide, confident smile on his face. He was going for the 29th spot this month. He had already paid the required fee, and all that was left for him was to bask in the envy and congratulations from others. That was why he had woken up early to arrive in the square. One of the workers stepped forward with a serious expression, and placed a rhomboid magic crystal in a slot located at the center of a black pillar, which was in turn situated in front of the magic screen. A blue light appeared, and the screen turned black before words began to appear upon it. 29th place, Mamie Restaurant. Braised chicken and rice. 30th place, Mamie Restaurant. La Giragiamo. Cries of surprise and elation erupted among the crowd. Ricky's smile instantly froze on his face. Th, that's impossible. Ricky looked at the last 2 rows of text on the magic screen, and his hands were trembling. The 29th place that he had dreamed of was gone, and even the guaranteed 30th place had been stripped away from him. Furthermore, it was the same restaurant that had dealt him those 2 heavy blows, a restaurant that he had never even heard of. Just a day ago, he received personal confirmation from Secretary Mars that Ricky's rotisserie was guaranteed a spot in the top 30. But what was going on now? A restaurant that he had never heard of had taken 2 places in the top 30 out of the blue, banishing Ricky's rotisserie to the 31st place. The envious expressions on the faces of those around him all turned into mocking sneers. The stark contrast was very difficult for Ricky to accept. Boss. What happened? The worker was also completely dumbstruck at the sight of Ricky's rotisserie, which was first on the second magic screen. Some of the people around Ricky were looking at him with gloating eyes. There were many restaurant owners who had heard Ricky boast about his assured spot in the top 30 among them, and it was very satisfying for them to see him take such a fall. All those who owned restaurants in the Aden Square knew that the Chamber of Commerce was manipulating the rankings. They were all very angry about it, but the opposition was rich and powerful, with strong ties to the Catering Association, so no one dared to say anything. However, a Mamie restaurant had appeared out of the blue with 2 dishes in the top 30, successfully breaking the stranglehold being exerted by the Chamber of Commerce. Even though it wasn't their own restaurants that had reached the top 30, all of the owners were still struck by an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Humph, that Mamie restaurant must have played some dirty tricks to get ahead of us. I'm sure the Catering Association will give me a proper explanation for this. Ricky harumphed coldly as he tried to calm down. He looked at the last 2 lines on the first screen, and his expression became even more determined as he said, I've never even heard of that name before, and they've never appeared on the Aden Square food competition. How did they suddenly get 2 dishes in the top 30? If this is an accurate representation of their food, then I'll strip naked and streak around the Aden Square for an entire lap. What the F***ck? Only 29th? How did the braised chicken and rice not claim the top spot? What kind of bullsh**t ranking is this? Reggiamo should be claiming the top spot. Taking a bite of it lets you experience the true meaning of life, and allows you to rediscover your burning passion. How could it only be ranked at number 30? Those 2 at least made it into the top 30. The breathtakingly unforgettable sweet tofu pudding is ranked at number 99. That's absolutely unacceptable. It's an insult to my faith. The sweet tofu pudding shouldn't even be on the rankings board. Anyone with a brain knows that the savory tofu pudding is better, but it's only claimed the 100th spot. Which one of the dishes ahead of it can compare to its delectable flavor? They're forcing me to vote with my feet. I love the Yangzhou fried rice the best, and I'm very angry that it's only at number 72. I've tasted all of the other dishes on the rankings board, but nothing compares to the Yangzhou fried rice. This rankings board is a load of bullsh**t. Everyone erupted into a frenzy after the rankings were released. Aside from the restaurant owners that were lamenting their exemption from the top 100, the loudest bunch was the Mamie restaurant customers. None of them were satisfied with the rankings that had been presented. In particular, when they saw the sweet and savory tofu puddings, which were number 99 and 100, respectively, they were all absolutely furious. The only reason why everyone was still repressing their rage was because the sweet and savory factions were all split up, so no one knew who their allies were. The top 30 is basically the same as last month, but an unknown restaurant claimed the last 2 spots. The vote was held by the Catering Association, so there should be no issues. Looks like that restaurant will be the most prominent black horse on the rankings board. That's not necessarily the case. Perhaps that restaurant's name will be wiped off the rankings board tomorrow. Everyone knows that you can make it onto the board if you pay enough money, but the Catering Association can't make it too obvious. They have to protect their reputation as well. The Catering Association has a reputation? They lost all of it 15 years ago. A few of the bitter restaurant owners banded together and conversed in low voices. Within the crowd, there was a fine and delicate young man with free-flowing red hair. Smiling, he said, "If my ears serve me right, many people seem to be arguing about Mamie Restaurant. To have so many customers take pride in the restaurant suggests that it's no ordinary establishment. I believe that it will indeed be a black horse, one that can stir up the entire rankings board." Everyone fell silent upon hearing that, and began to listen to what everyone around them was arguing about. Soon, their expressions showed they became very intrigued. They didn't know what this savory and sweet tofu pudding were, but what they could confirm was that everyone was indeed arguing about Mamie Restaurant. Furthermore, they were all very vehement about their ideas, but there was one unanimous opinion that united everyone: the rankings were too low. One had to realize that this was a restaurant that had made it onto the rankings board for the first time ever. Not only that, but they had 5 dishes in the top 100, among which 2 were even in the top 30. And yet, those people were still complaining that the rankings were too low? Even Dukas Restaurant, which had claimed the top spot with their whole roast lamb, only had a second dish at number 38, and 3 dishes in total in the top 100. Could it be that that restaurant hired these people to stage a fake argument? That was the first thought that flashed through everyone's mind. No. That's the boss of the largest textiles shop in the entire Aden Square. That infuriated man who was as red as a beetroot was the boss of the gold shop. That man with his sleeves rolled up is from the Grey Temple, and there's also an official from the City Lord's Castle. How can those people be hired as actors? Soon, everyone began to identify those Mamie Restaurant customers. They were all tycoons or people very high in status, people that would never even bother to visit the average restaurant unless that restaurant was run by the city lord's son-in-law. All of those nobles were frantically arguing over the same restaurant, so it was no exaggeration to refer to it as the most prominent black horse on the rankings board. Humph, let me see what kind of backers this restaurant has. How dare they fix the rankings so blatantly? I'm going to expose them for what they are, and show the customers that not everyone can make it onto the Aden Square food competition, let alone the top 30. Ricky squeezed his way out from within the crowd with a thunderous expression. He looked around before plucking out his worker by the collar, and asked furiously, "Where is this Mamie Restaurant?" I don't know." The worker had no clue. "Go west along the Aden Square all the way to the end and you'll find it. If you want to start some trouble for them, then I wish you good luck," Harrison said with a smile. "Boss, the rankings board has already been updated, but," Yabimiya immediately blurted out after entering the restaurant, but her words suddenly faltered as she caught sight of Mag was holding a platter with 4 bowls of tofu pudding on it, and his eyes lit up upon hearing that. He turned an expectant gaze toward Yabimiya, and asked, "So? Did our restaurant's food secure some good rankings?" Even though it was only the first day that the rankings board was released, that set the tone for the days to come. The restaurant had set a new record high in profits the day prior, and that was a lofty mark that would be difficult to exceed unless he released new dishes or became more powerful. Amy, who held Ugly Duckling, was full of confidence as she said, "Father's food must have taken all of the top spots. It's the best food." I'm sure there must have been an error with the voting process. Boss food is clearly the best, 100 times more delicious than the rest, but, a difficult expression appeared on Yabimiya's face, and she averted her eyes from Mag's expectant gaze. She wrung her hands together and desperately wanted to console him, but she couldn't find the words to do so. Her cheeks were completely flushed, and she didn't know what to say anymore. Sally walked in. She took a glance at the verbally constipated Yabimiya before informing, braised chicken and rice was number 29, La Jirujiamo was number 30, Yangzhou fried rice was number 72, sweet tofu pudding was number 99, and savory tofu pudding was number 100. Our restaurant has 5 dishes in the top 100. Sally's expression was also a little strained. In her eyes, Mag's food was the best in the world. Such delicious food should dominate the top 5 on the rankings board. Even though she had never tasted the savory tofu pudding, she was certain that it was most definitely good enough to claim the 5th spot. Yabimiya and Sally both appraised Mag with concerned looks. Even they were feeling quite wistful, so Mag had to be very dejected. They could imagine how terrible it had to feel to cook such delicious food, only to receive no acknowledgement and respect that he deserved. "Father, are you all right?" Amy was also quite concerned about Mag. The braised chicken and rice was ranked 29? And the Rugiamo also made it into the top 30? All 5 of our dishes made it into the top 100. Mag was elated after hearing Sally's report. Yabimiya and Sally looked at Mag with puzzlement and surprise. They had thought that he would be very dejected, but it appeared that he was very pleasantly surprised instead. "That's right. That was today's rankings board. It should get updated at 7 a.m. tomorrow," Sally confirmed with a nod. "That's great. Seeing as we achieved such good results on the first day, we have to maintain this standard. At the very least, we have to ensure that the braised chicken and rice and Rugiamo remain in the top 30. Mag nodded with a content expression. He was not putting up a strong front and feigning his elation. He was a bit more knowledgeable about the delicious cuisine rankings than Sally and the others. The rankings were decided according to the number of votes given, so just having delicious food was not enough. Without a sufficiently large customer base, even if all of their customers gave them 5-star ratings, it would be very difficult to secure good rankings. Compared to the other large restaurants, Mamie Restaurant had a far smaller customer base. As such, having 2 dishes in the top 30 was already a result that went beyond his expectations. Even though those 2 dishes only just made the cut, he didn't really mind, as he only wanted to complete the system's top 30 mission. Yabimiya and Sally were both very confused. They were unable to understand why Mag wasn't angry, but was quite ecstatic instead. "Come and have some breakfast. Due to your exceptional performance of late, from this day forth, an extra tofu pudding will be provided as part of your morning work meal." Mag didn't bother to explain anything as he placed the tofu puddings one by one onto the table. He then looked at the 2 of them with a smile, and asked, "What else would you like this morning?" "I want a Rugiamo," Yabimiya said as she raised her hand. "I want a Yangzhou fried rice." Sally was full of anticipation. "All right, coming right up." Mag nodded with a smile before turning toward the kitchen. Yabimiya and Sally looked at each other, only to find that their joy was mirrored in one another's eyes. Nothing was more blissful than being able to enjoy such delicious food first thing in the morning. At the entrance of the magic potion shop, Urian held a handful of grain, and was feeding Black Coal. He heard the sound of approaching footsteps, but he didn't turn around as he said, "There's water in the room, feel free to help yourselves." "Thank you for saving us." Zixi and Lulu bowed deeply toward Urian in unison. Urian slowly turned around and appraised them with a solemn expression. "You 2 are dryads," he said in a deep and indisputable voice. Zixi and Lulu's expressions changed at the same time, and Lulu stepped forward to shield Zixi. Both of them stared at Urian with nervous expressions. "Don't be so tense. I may not be a good person, but I'm not a bad person, either." Urian tipped the grain in his hand back into a little jar, and sat down in a lounge chair. He looked at the dryad couple with slightly narrowed eyes, and asked, "What relationship do the 2 of you share with Fruitan?" "The Great Dryad? You know Master Fruitan?" Zixi's eyes immediately lit up as she emerged from behind Lulu. Lulu was also quite surprised, but he still appraised Urien with a hint of caution in his eyes. They were the only two dryads left on the Norland continent, so very few people would be able to identify them, and even fewer would know the name of the great dryad. I do. Back when that old man was about to die, he asked me to help him find two younglings. He said that those two will be the hope of the dryads. Seeing as the world tree is in your body, you two must be the ones he was referring to. Urien nodded as he turned his gaze on Zixi. Zixi and Lulu's expressions changed again. They were already very surprised that he was able to identify them as dryads, but they were even more stunned that he knew about the world tree. The world tree was the final hope of the dryads, and they had never told anyone about it. Fruden asked me to give this to you. Urien reached for a little green box that was about the size of a hand, and gestured for Zixi to take it as he said indifferently, "My name is Urien. Perhaps you two have heard my name before. Lord of Ice Urien." Lulu and Zixi's eyes widened in unison as they stared at the hunched old man that was lying in the lounge chair. Shock lingered in Zixi and Lulu's eyes. Even though they had been in hiding on the continent for over 100 years, they were magic casters themselves, so they had heard of all of the most renowned figures in the magic world. In particular, they were quite familiar with the infamous fight between fire and ice. Now, the legendary Lord of Ice was sitting right in front of them. They had experienced Urien's terrifying ice magic the night prior, but neither of them made the connection between him and that legendary magic caster. However, they didn't have time to marvel at Urien's identity, as their attention had been drawn to the small green box in his hand. Zixi hesitated momentarily before striding forward and accepting the box, upon which tears immediately welled up in her eyes. The box was a little antiquated, and there was a string of peculiar symbols lining its surface. The symbols appeared a little jumbled and haphazardous, but they struck Zixi and Lulu with a strong sense of nostalgia. That was the language of the dryads. Those were symbols that were unique to them, and they had never seen those symbols ever since they had left the Night Forest over a century ago. Zixi gently ran her finger over the signature on the lower right corner of her box. She was excited yet grief-stricken as she said, "It really is the Great Dryad. He gave it to me over 100 years ago. There should be a special Dryad seal on it." "I've never opened the box," Urien said. Zixi nodded, and quickly scanned the text on the box with her eyes. She turned her left palm upward, and a small seedling with only a single green leaf at its tip appeared in her hand. The seedling slowly flew toward the box in her right hand, and that green leaf came into contact with the box. It was as if a stone had been tossed into a calm lake. The symbols on the antiquated green box lit up one after another, and the box itself rose slowly into the air. Bursts of rainbow light erupted from it, illuminating the flowing sand particles that were swirling on the surface of the box, creating a very spectacular sight. Zixi's hand flew to her mouth, and she exclaimed, "That's the Great Dryad's flowing sand world. It really is the flowing sand world." Lulu was also extremely excited, and his lips trembled as he was struck by the urge to kneel before the box. "Flowing sand world? That old bloke sure is daring. Wasn't he afraid that I would take it for myself?" Urien sat bolt upright in his lounge chair, and there was also a hint of surprise in his eyes as he stared at the shimmering little box that was hanging in midair. He then got up and closed the door to his shop. The flowing sand world was an independent small world. The dryads nurtured the world tree, which was renowned for its ability to create a true small world. The flowing sand world was the small world that had been created by the previous world tree, and it was placed under the care of the Great Dryad. After that, the dryads fell, and the world tree was toppled, so no one knew where the flowing sand world had gone. Only the Great Dryad knew of its location, while his other brethren didn't even know in what form it existed in this world. They could only see it when offering sacrifices to their ancestors, and it was constantly being presented to them in different forms even then. The only constants were the rainbow light and the swirling sand. Upon coming into contact with that rainbow light, Zixi's world tree also appeared to be very excited. It wiggled its branches and bathed within the light. Soon, the green leaf at the tip of the tree grew larger in size, and appeared to be filled with vitality. Right at that moment, the light from the box flashed, and the projection of a humanoid figure appeared. It showed an old man with white hair, wearing a set of green magician robes. His features appeared very benevolent, and he appraised Zixi and Lulu with a warm smile as he said, "Zixi, Lulu, you're all grown up now. Great Dryad." Both Zixi and Lulu stepped back, and extended a respectful salute. Both looked at the projection of the old man and tried their hardest to repress their sorrow. "Don't be sad, children. You two are the only ones who can carry on our legacy. I'm very happy to see you two again, and the new world tree as well. That tells me that I entrusted the heart of the world tree to the right people." Fruden was quite elated as he looked at the tiny world tree seedling. Zixi also looked at the little seedling, and said self-critically, "But Great Dryad, Zixi hasn't done a good job in protecting the world tree. It's almost completely wilted, and I couldn't make it thrive and prosper." Fruden shook his head, and praised, "No, you've already completed the mission I assigned to you by hatching the world tree. The werewolves have been hunting the two of you, and the elves have also been searching for you, so you must have suffered a lot during these years. You two are already the heroes of the Dryads for being able to accomplish what you have so far. Now, I'm entrusting the flowing sand world to you." During that battle all those years ago, the flowing sand world was almost destroyed. I used up the last shreds of nature power I had to hold it together, but the world is in a very unstable state, so no one can enter. The little box in front of Fruden hovered toward Zixi. His eyes shimmered with a faint light as he said, "Plant the world tree here, and use its power of laws to reform the flowing sand world. Build a new world upon the ruins of the flowing sand world. If this world has renounced us Dryads, then we'll just have to create a new one, and stage a resurgence. All of that will fall upon your shoulders." Zixi gently caught the shimmering little box, and smooth flowing sand covered her right hand before swirling along her arm. It encompassed her entire body practically in the blink of an eye, leaving only her neck, head, and hands exposed. It was as if a rainbow dress had draped itself over her body. Zixi closed her eyes, and could sense a certain connection forming between herself and the flowing sand world. The world tree slowly hovered toward the box before taking root on it. Those roots grew at a rate that was perceptible to the naked eye, and they gripped the box tightly as if they were tentacles. The wilted seedling took root on the antiquated green box, and rainbow sand swirled around it, creating a peculiar scene that was also somehow very harmonious. Lulu stared at Zixi with a nervous expression, but he repressed the urge to speak. She was receiving an important inheritance, the Great Dryad's inheritance. She was inheriting a world. That was an inheritance unique to the Dryads, one that only the regal Great Dryad could bestow. The process lasted about half an hour. Zixi slowly opened her eyes, and countless symbols flashed through her golden pupils. The flowing sand swirling around her rose from her body, creating what appeared to be a barrier. "Disperse," Zixi uttered softly. The sand instantly receded, flowing back into that little box. The rainbow light emanating from the box also faded, while a green light appeared on her hand. Both the box and the world tree disappeared in a flash. Fruden's eyes were filled with approval and elation as he said, "Very good. From this day forth, you are the Great Dryad, Zixi." Zixi. How could Zixi be known as the Great Dryad? That won't do, Zixi can't do it. Zixi shook her head vigorously in a slightly panicked manner. The only criterion for becoming the Great Dryad is to obtain the acknowledgement of the world tree. You have satisfied that condition even better than I was able to, Fruden said with a smile. Compared to the simple-minded Lulu, you're clearly more suitable for the task. Zixi turned to Lulu, who was also looking at her with an encouraging smile. She was suddenly instilled with a sense of confidence, and could sense the world tree radiating joy and excitement within her body. She turned back to Fruden, and nodded with a serious expression as she said, "I'll take good care of it, and make it grow into an enormous world tree. I'm sure you're up to the task. I'm convinced that you two will be able to make the Dryads reappear on the Norland continent. Fruden nodded with a smile, his body was now becoming increasingly more insubstantial. He then turned to Urien with a smile, and said, "What did I tell you, Urien? I told you that a day would come when even you would grow old, but you refused to believe me. How about now? You're an old man, haha." Urien pursed his lips with displeasure, and retorted, "At least I'm still alive. You've been dead for over 100 years, you old fart. Speaking of that, I really do envy you young people. Still, death isn't too bad. I've gotten sick of living after several centuries anyway, death is a lot more peaceful." Fruden was not enraged by Urien's words. After a short pause, he adopted a serious expression, and said, "Before you come over to join me, please look after those two. Us Dryads cannot go extinct no matter what. How many they can give birth to will depend on them." Urien pursed his lips. "Ha ha ha, you're just as naughty as ever, you little brat." Fruden laughed heartily before completely dissipating. Silence descended upon the magic potion shop. Zixi stared blankly up at the roof overhead. Lulu gently placed a hand on her shoulder, but didn't say anything, either. Urien slowly lay back down in his lounge chair. He wore no expression on his face, but there was a nostalgic look in his eyes. Back then, he was still young, and liked to go on adventures everywhere. He wasn't a legendary figure yet, and encountered many interesting people and intriguing things during his travels. Urien was silent for a long time before looking up at Zixi, and breaking the silence. "If you don't mind the low wages, you can work at my shop." "Really?" Zixi was slightly taken aback before a hint of excitement appeared on her face. The werewolves from the day before had already been detained, and most likely wouldn't be released for a long time, but there were many werewolves out there who could still hunt them down. In that case, they wouldn't be able to remain in Chaos City. But Zixi had just found a way to help the World Tree recover, as well as to repair her body, and if they were to leave Chaos City, then they would never be able to eat Mag's braised chicken and rice again. That was unacceptable to them. However, if Urien was willing to employ them, then their safety would be ensured. With the legendary magic caster, Lord of Ice Urien, extending a helping hand, they wouldn't have to fear any danger in Chaos City. Zixi hesitated momentarily before asking nervously, then, "Can Lulu also stay? I don't employ clumsy people." Urien shook his head. At the sight of Zixi's dejected expression, he slowly added, "That room upstairs if for you. You can keep as many people as you want there. He's your man, so you'd better earn enough money to keep him alive." Zixi's eyes immediately lit up on hearing that, and she bowed to Urien as she said, "Thank you, Master Urien." "Thank you." A smile also appeared on Lulu's face, and he, too, extended a grateful bow toward Urien. They had been wandering the Norland continent for over 100 years, slowly growing up from children in the process. They had suffered far too many hardships, and what they yearned for most wasn't revenge. Instead, they simply wanted to settle down somewhere, and truly live. They merely wanted to have many children, so they could ensure the survival of the Dryads, and to create a prosperous race again. They had seen hope the day before. After falling into complete despair, and resigning themselves to death, Mag and everyone else stepped in to save their lives. They had thought that their life on the run would continue, but all of that had come to an abrupt end. "We only sell potions, tonics, and ointments here. Every time a vial is sold, you have to replace it with a new one on the shelves. That will be the extent of your work. After subtracting the costs, you can take half of the profit, but there is no bare minimum wage, so your earnings will directly correlate with the shop's earnings." Urien pointed at the magic potions on the shelves before getting up, and pulling out a dusty black magic tome from behind the counter. He tossed the book casually onto the counter, and said, "This is a guide for mixing potions. If you encounter something you're unfamiliar with, then have a look through the book. As long as the potions you mix don't kill anyone, the effect doesn't really matter. But isn't half too much? This is your shop, after all. Zixi was a little hesitant about taking such a large cut of the profits. Don't expect a whole lot of income. Half of the store's profits will only be enough to half fill your stomachs. Urian pursed his lips, and strode out the door as he said, seeing as you two are all better now, you can start working today. Breakfast is on me. Are we going to Mamie restaurant? Thank you, Master Urian. Zixi's eyes immediately lit up at the mention of food. She quickly hurried out the door with Lulu closed behind her. A long line had already gathered outside the restaurant. The sweet and savory factions seemed to be more antagonistic toward each other than usual, and many people were flushed with rage. Some had even rolled up their sleeves, and it appeared that a mass brawl was imminent. Idiots who are into sweet tofu pudding. I'm warning all of you right now, stop giving the savory tofu pudding 1-star votes. Do you people not have a conscience? Humph. It's you savory faction people that should take a good look at yourselves. Sweet tofu pudding is not to be insulted. Number 99 on the rankings is an absolute farce. Fight me, trash! Someone suddenly let loose an enraged roar among the crowd. The sounds of swords being drawn immediately erupted in front of the restaurant. The sounds of swords being drawn came as a surprise to Urian's trio, and they all halted in their steps as they turned to look at the line. Coincidentally, Ricky had also just arrived on the scene with his employee. He was going to expose this unknown restaurant's shady dealings, and recover the 29th spot that was meant for his restaurant. However, he was also startled by the scene that greeted him there, and came to an abrupt halt. After the swords were drawn, deathly silence ensued. Many people in the line were a little scared upon seeing the drawn weapons, but they refused to back down, and drew determination from their undying loyalty to the tofu pudding of their chosen flavor. Thus, both factions glared at one another, and neither was about to concede. Ugly duckling, do you think they're finally going to fight? I've been waiting every single day, they've finally drawn their swords. Amy was sitting on a little stool at the entrance with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She was supporting her chin with one hand, and her eyes were wide with anticipation. Ricky was a little confused by the sight of the farcical scene outside the restaurant, but a thought quickly occurred to him. Why are there so many people lining up? And they've all drawn their swords? Could it be that we're not the only ones trying to expose them? The worker behind him was a little frightened, and asked in a low voice, Boss, what do we do now? At times like these, someone needs to step up and rally the troops. Our Ricky's rotisserie is the main victim in all of this, and that duty falls upon me as its boss. Ricky could feel his heart rate accelerating as blood flowed straight into his head. His cheeks were flushed as he swaggered toward the two opposing factions. He spread his arms open, and yelled, Boycott the Aiden Square food competition. Smash this F***ing restaurant. The situation outside the restaurant was very tense, and it was so quiet that one could hear even a pin drop. As such, Ricky's vehement cry was clearly heard by all of the customers. Everyone turned to look at him in unison, all of them with benevolent looks in their eyes, the same type of benevolence afforded to children with mental disability. The sweet and savory factions were indeed in conflict with one another, but no one wanted to boycott the food competition or smash Mamie restaurant. They had voted diligently during the competition, and were very displeased that the restaurant's dishes had been ranked so low. Was this guy trying to pour salt over their wounds? And he wanted to smash the restaurant? Many people recalled the Rugiemos awarded to the Burning Legion, and wanted to step up to take care of that rabble-rouser for Mag. Perhaps their actions would also be rewarded by free Rugiemos. With that in mind, many of the sword-wielding customers began to appraise Ricky with animosity in their eyes. The werewolves from the day prior were too powerful, but this fat mortal seemed to be an easy target. Amy also turned her gaze on Ricky, and thought to herself, is that a bad person? Father has only just replaced the door, so I won't allow him to go in this time. Thus, she lifted her chin off her hand, and a burst of bluish-violet flames began to dance along her fingertips. Ricky's heart rate continued to spike at the sight of everyone turning to look at him. He was thoroughly basking in the feeling of commanding such widespread attention, and there was so much adrenaline pumping through his veins that he couldn't see the enmity in everyone's eyes. He was already beginning to envision himself as the leader of a revolution, charging at the forefront as everyone stormed through the doors of that unreasonable restaurant. They were going to raze the establishment to the ground, and then give the heinous boss a brutal beating before making him admit in front of everyone that he had manipulated the food competition's results. He hadn't experienced that kind of hot-blooded passion in many years, and it was an extremely exhilarating feeling. Boycott the food competition. Smash this F***ing restaurant. Ricky raised his fist to the sky, yelling at the top of his lungs. His eyes were bloodshot as he advanced toward the door of the restaurant, attempting to lead the charge. Smash it! Smash it! His employee was influenced by his passion, and also echoed his cries with vehement fanaticism. He hadn't thought that the boss was such a courageous and righteous person. Just thinking about smashing the restaurant with those customers was getting his blood boiling. Zixi looked at the two revolutionaries with an adorable expression, and asked, "Those two? Are they already drunk so early in the morning? Some people simply want to die." Urian pursed his lips as he took a glance at the fat Ricky. Ricky quickly made his way to the door of the restaurant, and only then did he turn around with a confused expression to look at the eerily silent customers behind him. He had thought that his words would light the fuse, and all of them would heed his call, smashing open the door before laying waste to the restaurant. Why were they suddenly so quiet? Looks like everyone is quite civilized, but there is a time and place for manners, and this is not one of those settings. You all need someone courageous to lead you, and I will be happy to fill that role. Ricky could see that everyone was looking at him, and felt like a hero that was being revered and worshipped. As such, his confidence was bolstered further, and his entire body was filled with power and passion. Don't be scared. I am the boss of Ricky's rotisserie, Ricky Berman. I am the manifestation of justice and fairness. I trust that everyone must have seen the strange dishes on the Aiden Square food competition rankings. You are all correct to be angry. I have never even heard of this shabby restaurant, so how can it possibly have 2 dishes in the top 30 for its first time participating in the food competition? How can it have 5 dishes in the top 100? That's a feat that even the well-established restaurants cannot accomplish. As such, I'm sure that this restaurant's rankings have been fixed. What is this braised chicken and rice trash? La Girugiamo? Just the names of those dishes make me want to barf. How could they be worthy of the spots in the top 30? His blatant manipulation of the voting system is absolutely disgraceful. As a loyal follower of the Aiden Square food competition, I cannot allow something like this to happen. We must vent the rage in our hearts, and tell these deceitful businesses that we are not idiots. So let's smash this restaurant, and restore the order of the Aiden Square food competition. Ricky became more and more excited as he yelled, and at the conclusion of his stirring speech, he rushed directly toward the door of the restaurant. Right at that moment, the door suddenly opened outward. What's going on? Who's causing all this ruckus here? Crack! A muffled thump erupted as the wooden door slammed Ricky in the face, sending him flying back through the air. He was a fatso that weighed in excess of 100 kilograms, and he was falling into the crowd. Everyone dispersed to open up some space, and watched as he thumped heavily into the ground. He lay dazed on his back with a red door mark on his face, just as if he had just had the soul bashed out of him. Mag was also a little taken aback upon seeing that. He had just finished breakfast, and was coming out to remind Amy about her morning lessons. However, he wasn't expecting someone to be charging at the door, and sent them flying as he opened it. Thus, he was feeling a little apologetic as he looked at the dazed fatso on the ground. If the victim were a customer, then his business could suffer. He was sent flying by that door. Mag really isn't someone to be messed with. All of the customers appraised Mag with peculiar expressions. Even though Ricky appeared to only be a mortal, he was still a fully grown 100 kilograms man. For him to be sent flying was quite a shocking spectacle. Of course, the customers that were about to beat him up were feeling quite disappointed. They hadn't even had a chance to teach Ricky a lesson before Mag took care of him himself. Wow, father is so strong. The little fireball on Amy's fingertip was snuffed out, and she clapped her little hands together with glee. She looked up at Mag with adoration and reverence on her face. How could this be? Is this restaurant owner supposed to be a powerful man? Ricky was lying on the ground, and his face throbbed with searing pain. It was certainly not a good feeling to be swatted into the air by a door, and rage was building up in his heart. He hadn't even gotten a chance to strike yet, but had been struck down himself. That guy had to be the restaurant's owner, but that didn't matter. Even though he had been struck down, there were still countless comrades behind him, all of whom were wielding sabers and swords. There was no lack of orcs and demons among them, either, so no matter how powerful the restaurant owner was, there was no way that he could beat everyone. With that in mind, Ricky's confidence was restored, and he clasped a hand over his throbbing cheek as he struggled to his feet. He spread his arms open again, and yelled, "Not only is he fixing the rankings, he's even assaulting people. Where's the justice? Everyone, get him! Smash your f***ing face!" A demon that was close to 2 meters tall aimed a vicious slap at his face, slamming him right into the ground again. The demon then gave him a kick, and grumbled, "I really am angry about Mamie Restaurant's rankings, but it's only because the rankings were too low. I really detest people like you. Your food is trash, but you don't think about improving yourself. All you want to do is slander those who are better than you. People like you deserve to be bashed wherever you go." Exactly. You're the manifestation of justice? Last time, there was a maggot in the roast meat that I got from your SAHDR rotisserie, and you guys blamed me for planting the maggot in the meal. How about now, hey? Where are your bodyguards? Mag's food is more than 100 times more delicious than your trashy roast meat. What gives you the confidence and courage to provoke him? You say you want to barf at those names? Whenever I hear Rugiamo nowadays, I can't help but drool. There's no need to waste time with words. Brothers, let's set aside our differences, and bash this shameless b*****. Regardless of whether you're part of the sweet or savory faction, this man is the public enemy. Scoot aside, let me kick him too. The customers outside the restaurant erupted into a frenzy, raining down attacks upon Ricky in a torrential downpour. Ricky was completely dumbstruck by the brutal beating that he was suffering. Anguished, he howled, "Stop! Stop! We're all allies! Stop! Arg, not the face, allies my ***s. Don't try to defile us. The sweet and savory factions have united to combat shameless restaurant owners like you." An elderly woman prodded Ricky's stomach with her cane disdainfully. "I agree. If we continue to give 1-star ratings to the opposing faction's tofu pudding, these shameless bastards are the ones that will benefit in the end. If it's something made by Mag, then it must be more delicious than everyone else's cooking. That's right. Hurting one another like this is not the way to go. We should unite, and give all of the tofu puddings 5-star ratings. Let's show everyone the true power of the tofu pudding." The enraged cries from the customers drowned out Ricky's cries for help. Ironically, he had become the catalyst for the two factions to form an alliance and come to a mutual understanding. Seeing as Mag sold the same number of sweet and savory tofu puddings every day, their rankings were inevitably inseparable in the food competition. For the sake of the restaurant, cooperation was the only path forward. Boss, the rotisserie employee looked on with a dumbfounded expression. His boss had been full of vigor, storming the restaurant just a moment ago, but was now inundated by furious customers to the extent that he was no longer even visible among the crowd. "There's another one here." A burly man plucked the employee by the collar, and threw him into the crowd. Thus, everyone had two targets on which they could vent their rage. "What's going on?" Mag was just about to apologize to the fat middle-aged man, and he was also a little stunned. However, he quickly understood the gist of things from the conversation between his customers. It appeared that those two were trying to start trouble for him after witnessing the Aden Square food competition rankings, only to fall into the hands of the restaurant's customers. Thus, they fell victim to vigilante justice, and were plunged into a very tragic situation. Mag was not going to extend any sympathy toward people who were trying to cause trouble for him. He had to show everyone that he was not to be messed with. However, Mag was quite touched that his customers would take the initiative to beat up rabble-rousers in his stead. They were only customers, but they were fighting so hard for the reputation and glory of the restaurant at which they dined. That was a very moving notion to Mag. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he said, "Let's stop there, everyone. We don't want to end up killing him." All of the customers burst into laughter upon hearing that. "Help! I'm going to die." Ricky's anguished cries continued, but the response was only more physical abuse. Harrison got in a few kicks before he emerged from the crowd, and panted heavily as he asked, "Mag, what happened to the forge next door? How did those shops collapse?" The forge beside the restaurant was still a pile of rubble, and a bunch of dwarven stonemasons were cleaning up the wreckage. They were reconstructing the building with an extremely high efficiency, but the gargantuan crater in the ground was still clearly visible, and it appeared as if a battle had taken place there. Maybe it was an earthquake. Mag shrugged. He didn't think it was a good idea to spread word about the explosion. If the Grey Temple or the City Lord's castle were to learn about the fact that Mabai had invented explosives, they would probably pay as much attention to it as they did with the steam engine. If Mabai could succeed, then he would create a weapon that even mortals could use but powerful enough to threaten giant dragons. That would create a massive stir throughout the entire Norland continent. Mabai would most likely require a long time to invent something like that on his own, but if the Grey Temple and City Lord's castle were to invest in the project, a successful prototype would be created in no time. Mag didn't want that to happen. If that were to eventuate, the world would change far too quickly, and it would become a very unpredictable and volatile place. "I see. Your restaurant sure was lucky." Harrison nodded. The three neighboring shops had all been damaged, and while the restaurant directly neighbored the forge, it was completely unscathed. At that moment, Mag caught sight of the approaching Urian, and he smiled as he asked, "Master Urian, when will Amy's lessons be held today?" He then took a glance at Lulu and Zixi, discovering that Lulu was still a little pale, but he appeared to be fine. Meanwhile, Zixi looked as if she had already fully recovered. She was proficient in using healing magic, and it looked like her self-regenerative abilities were quite exemplary as well. "We'll start the lesson at 8 a.m., after getting some food to eat." Urian looked at Amy with a smile, and greeted, "Morning, little Amy." "Good morning, Master Turtle." Amy stood up with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and returned the greeting. She then turned to Zixi and Lulu with elation on her face, and asked, "Big Sister Zixi, Big Bear, are you two all better now?" "We sure are. After having your father's delicious chicken soup, both of us are feeling a lot better." A happy smile appeared on Zixi's face as she patted Amy on the head. "Father's chicken soup is the best." Amy nodded with an affirmative expression, and her eyes were shimmering with pride. "Thank you, Mag, and the two girls as well." Zixi extended a grateful bow toward Mag, as well as Yabimiya and Sally, who were standing behind him. "You're welcome." Mag shook his head with a smile. Amy really liked Zixi, so he also had a very good impression of her. "Don't mention it." Yabimiya hurriedly waved her hands, and her expression suggested that she was a little embarrassed. Sally merely nodded her head in response. Her thought process was very simple, she had indeed helped them the day prior, so she was deserving of their gratitude. Time to open for business. Welcome, everyone. Mag took a glance at the clock before opening the doors to his restaurant. As for the two people who had been thumped by his enraged customers, he completely ignored them. They had come with the sole purpose of causing trouble for him, so they deserved the treatment that they had received. Sally and Yabimiya stood on either side of the door, one with a smile on her face, while the other wore a cold expression and began their workday. The customers swarmed in, leaving Ricky and his employee behind. However, some customers still gave them an obligatory kick before rushing into the restaurant. I'll be back. Ricky looked up at Mamie Restaurant's sign. His face was completely swollen, and he began to crawl away with difficulty. Never did he think that he would suffer such a horrific ordeal at the hands of those whom he thought comrades. Wait for me, boss, the employee also crawled after him. He had no idea what had just happened. He had only chanted a few sentences before being beaten for no apparent reason. The rankings that had been released in the morning dealt a heavy blow to both the sweet and savory factions, and tension had been about to boil over into a full-blown confrontation. However, Ricky and his employee had successfully drawn all of the antagonism toward them, thereby allowing the two factions to unite, deciding to help one another for the sake of a greater future. Mag was naturally very happy to see that. His braised chicken and rice and his la jirujiamo were already in the top 30, but if his other dishes could also climb up the rankings, then it would be a big help to him. The system's intentions were quite obvious, it wanted to increase the restaurant's fame. On this occasion, it was the top 30. What about next time? Top 20? Top 10? Those were all things that Mag had to consider. The morning service passed by in a busy blur. After Urian finished having breakfast, Amy went with him to attend her lessons. What surprised Mag was that Urian had decided to take Zixi and Lulu under his wing. In fact, he had already been quite surprised that Urian had interfered to protect the two the night prior. After all, Urian wasn't some benevolent old man. Why would he choose to take in the dryad couple? All right, I gave sweet tofu pudding a 5-star rating, but that won't shake my love for savory tofu pudding. Humph, as much as it hurts me to do so, I also gave savory tofu pudding 5 stars. Our main objective is to get tofu pudding into the top rank. The customers at the door conversed grudgingly with one another. Boss, they only ate one flavor of tofu pudding each, but they're voting for both. Isn't that cheating? Yabimiya was a little concerned as she looked at Magham. That's a good point. Even though we didn't ask them to do this, if an investigation were to be launched, it could prove to be problematic. Mag contemplated the notion momentarily, and his head was beginning to throb. He didn't want to stoop to any underhanded tactics to do well on the rankings. However, after forging an alliance, the sweet and savory factions were casting extra votes for him voluntarily. Mag wasn't sure if that was against the rules, but as long as the braised chicken and rice and rijiamo could remain in the top 30, he wasn't concerned. Lulu made his way over to the forge, and scratched his head in a slightly nervous manner. He looked at Mabai, who was issuing instructions to the dwarven stonemasons, and adopted a bashful smile as he asked, "Boss, is your forge still hiring? I'm not very bright, but I'm strong and can help you with manual labor." Am I hiring? Mabai dusted himself off, and looked up at Lulu, who was twice his height. He sized Lulu up carefully before shaking his head, and replying, "You look like you're cut out for it, but if you're too clumsy, then you won't succeed in this role. Besides, I've never taken an apprentice or hired any employees before." Zixi pinched Lulu in the waist to shut him up before taking over the conversation. She took a glance at the ruined forge, and said, "Boss, he's only clumsy with his words, but he's actually really smart. He's a really quick learner, and if you take him in as your apprentice, he'll be able to help you out a lot. You'll be able to craft more weapons and earn even more money with him around. If you don't believe me, you can get Lulu to help you clean up the forge. He's a really snappy worker. Well, a contemplative expression appeared on Mabai's face upon hearing that. He looked at Lulu, then at Zixi, and finally nodded as he said, "All right, then I'll give him a chance. But I make no guarantees about whether I'll hire him or not. My business is not very profitable, and I can't afford to have lazy workers." "Thank you, boss. Lulu will be sure to satisfy you." An elated smile appeared on Zixi's face. She clenched her fist, and encouraged, "Go, Lulu, you're the best. I'm sure you'll succeed in the role." "I'll do my best," Lulu replied with a smile of his own. Zixi was working at the magic potion shop, so he couldn't just sit around and expect her to feed him. If he could get a job at the neighboring forge, that would be perfect. Mag had only just emerged from the restaurant, and was quite happy to see that. It appeared that the Dryads were really intending on living in Chaos City permanently. It was a good thing. At the very least, Amy had 2 more playmates. "All right, clean up everything here. Just do what they tell you to do," Mabai instructed. He then turned round, and strode directly toward Mag. "All right," Lulu replied before making his way toward the wreckage. Even though he hadn't fully recovered, cleaning up some debris wasn't an issue for him. Meanwhile, Zixi returned to the magic potion shop, and began her first day of work there. Mabai approached Mag, and asked, "Mag, your business is going really well. Ever thought about expanding?" Mag had only come out for some fresh air, and he faltered upon hearing that. He had indeed thought about expanding the restaurant. After all, with his current customer base, 64 seats simply weren't enough. He didn't want to compress his customers' dining space, so the only viable option was to expand. However, Mag didn't have any control over the restaurant's expansion. After all, the restaurant had been built by the system, so it was naturally responsible for expansion as well. With the system's crappy personality, there was most likely no way it would agree to an expansion until he could upgrade the restaurant. Furthermore, his biggest headache wasn't the system. Instead, it was the location of his restaurant, which was situated in the northwestern corner of the Aiden Square. A little further to the west would take one to the Basti prison, so if he were to expand westward, he would be toppling the walls of the prison to open his restaurant there, which was clearly not a viable option. However, Mabai's forge was situated directly to the east. Mabai's forge had been running for several decades, so he definitely wouldn't be willing to give it up for the restaurant's expansion. However, it was a bit peculiar that he would take the initiative to ask about an expansion. "So this is what I'm thinking. Back in the day, I actually purchased all 4 of those shops together. I was planning to expand the forge if business was good, but over 4 decades have passed since then, and I haven't even gotten around to it." Mabai smiled as he pointed to the shop near Urian's, and said, "I apologize for what happened this morning, and I thank you for the inspiration that you have provided me with. As such, I plan on reconstructing my forge next to the magic potion shop. If you would like to expand, I can sell these 3 shops to you for the market price." "You sure are a rich man, Mabai." Mag was a little surprised. The shops next to the forge had always been empty, but he never thought that the reason behind it was that they belonged to Mabai. He then asked internally, "System, can we expand the restaurant? The restaurant's level is too low, so expansion cannot be facilitated. Please upgrade the restaurant as soon as possible in order to unlock more rights." "I see." Mag wasn't really surprised by that response. However, the system's reply at least indicated that expansion would become available following the upgrades of the restaurant. In that case, they would be able to house more customers at a time. As mentioned before, they had the prison to their left, so they could expand only to the right. As such, the 3 shops that Mabai was offering to him were very important. After all, the Aiden Square had been constructed according to the City Lord Castle's plans. Expanding into the square was illegal, and his restaurant would most likely get torn down the next day, so he couldn't afford to take such a risk. I don't have enough money and staff at the moment, so I won't be able to expand the restaurant for now. However, I certainly have thought about it, and I would be very grateful if you could reserve those 3 shops for me for a while, Mag replied with a smile. He really didn't have the money to purchase those 3 shops yet, and besides, he didn't have the power to expand his restaurant anyway. No problem. Just tell me when you want them. I'll get people to build an empty construction on the 3 sites so it can fool the inspectors. They've been in disuse for several decades already, so I'm not in a hurry to let go of them. Mabai nodded with a smile. After conversing with Mag for a while longer, he returned to the wreckage of his forge, and began to discuss constructing a new forge with the dwarven craftsman. What a friendly city! A faint smile lingered on Mag's face as he looked at the busy dwarves. If the restaurant expanded to take over the 3 neighboring shops, it would be able to seat about 300 customers at once. His cooking efficiency would also increase over time, so there was a lot more profit to be made for the restaurant. System, is your God of Cookery upgrade wheel ready yet? It's been 5 days, Mag asked internally. 6 of the options on the wheel have been decided. Seeing as you've completed all of the system missions, you have the right to choose the 7th option. You can choose a recipe for any dish as well, the system replied. Miles was standing outside Andrew's pork chops shop. He was looking at Andrew with an excited expression as he said, "Hey, Andrew, have you heard? This is the first day that they're releasing the Aiden Square Food Competition rankings, and all 5 of Mamie Restaurant's dishes have made it into the top 100. On top of that, 2 of them made it into the top 30. My workers told me this morning. I'm surprised that the other 3 didn't reach the top 50. All 5 of the dishes deserve to be in the top 5. Andrew was a little disappointed as he put down his knife. It's not like you don't know about the inner workings behind the rankings. Mamie Restaurant is still too small, and this is its first time participating in the competition, so 2 dishes in the top 30 is already very impressive. Miles sighed. The rankings are all being fixed by the Chamber of Commerce. You weren't even in the top 20 this time, and if things continue like this, you'll be out of the top 30 sooner or later. That's true. Our restaurant has been running for close to 2 decades, and we sell more than 1,000 servings of our signature dishes every day. Even so, we still can't break into the top 10. Those guys are just getting more and more shameless. Bernice joined the conversation, and shook her head with a hint of indignation. I feel like the rankings are more interesting this time. Mag has forced his way into the top 30, and taken 2 spots in the process. Those people who purchased rankings must be furious. The Chamber of Commerce's stranglehold has been shaken, and this is something that has never happened before. Old Man Bishop chuckled as he strode over with his hands clasped behind his back. His spring onion Bing was still outside of the top 100, but he didn't really care anymore. Indeed. It's been many years since a black horse like this has appeared. I'm just afraid that Mag will encounter some trouble as a result. He's only one man, while the Chamber of Commerce is a colossus. It would be really bad if they were to target him. Bernice was a little concerned. Everyone gathered together and conversed freely. They were elated that someone had been able to rain on the Chamber of Commerce's parade, but at the same time, they were concerned for the future of Mamie Restaurant. In a large room in the Chamber of Commerce, Cyril was playing with a colorful little snake while sitting in his leather chair behind his desk. Mars, who was standing on the other side of the desk, asked, "Young master, Boss Ricky of Ricky's Rotisserie was assaulted this morning. Should we report this to the president?" Cyril didn't even raise his head as he asked, "Ricky? Who's that? And why would we report news of him being assaulted to the president?" Ricky's Rotisserie is a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. They have paid for 3 consecutive months to guarantee a spot in the top 30 in the Aiden Square Food Competition, and today is the first day that the rankings have been released. Ricky's Rotisserie was ranked at number 31, and the restaurant that had taken the 30th spot was Mamie Restaurant. They were the ones who assaulted Ricky. Mars paused momentarily before continuing. Devo and Gudania were also detained because of that restaurant. It's said that one of the hired thugs from the Devo tavern was killed by the boss of Mamie Restaurant. Cyril finally raised his head upon hearing that, and looked at Mars with a thunderous expression as he asked, "Who is this guy? Is he trying to oppose our Chamber of Commerce?" "I've already done some investigating, and I found that the boss name is Mag, but I wasn't able to dig up any information about his background. He opened Mamie Restaurant in the northwestern corner of the Aden Square about a month ago, and attracted many customers in that short span of time. The prices at his restaurant are extremely high, and even the cheapest dish costs 200 copper coins." The altercation that he had with Gudania in the past, Mars began to introduce Mag, as well as how the conflict between Mag and Gudania had arisen. "He's just a cocky little clown. A restaurant owner like him dares to declare that our Chamber of Commerce will close down." Cyril pursed his lips with disdain, and said, "There's no need to report something so insignificant to the president. Just tell the Catering Association to wipe the restaurant from the rankings, then go and cause trouble for them regularly. Let me see if his little restaurant or our Chamber of Commerce will close down first." But his daughter has 2 10th-tier magic casters instructing her. "If we do that," Mars was a little concerned. "So what? It's not like we're attacking them. Are those 2 magic casters going to attack us in Chaos City? Give that fatso at the Catering Association some money, and he'll be more than happy to do our bidding." Cyril smiled nonchalantly, and said, "There's nothing in this world that can't be resolved with money." Mars opened his mouth to say something, but he was abruptly cut off. "That's enough. You've become more and more cowardly, Mars. Back when your father was working for the president, he was renowned for his decisiveness." Cyril glanced at Mars as he wound the colorful snake around his finger. He then stood up and left, but he paused at the door, and said, "Sometimes, you have to make a decision. Those who can't make decisions will be left behind. Young master, it really is difficult for me to bet everything on you. Besides, the first lesson my father ever taught me was to never place all of my eggs in the same basket." Mars looked at Cyril's departing figure, and shook his head as he also left the room. Mag faltered momentarily upon hearing the system's words before asking, "What did you just say?" "You can choose a dish as one of the options on the wheel. After completing the tofu pudding mission, you will have the chance to secure that recipe if you can get it on the wheel," the system repeated. "System, did you rediscover your conscience?" Mags raised an eyebrow skeptically. As a system with an ever-present conscience, the system refuses to answer this question, the system replied a little unhappily. "Any dish is fine." Mag was still in disbelief. "All dishes on Earth are applicable," the system confirmed. "Let me have a good think about this." Countless thoughts ran through Mag's head. Shandong cuisine, Sichuan cuisine, Cantonese cuisine, Jiangsu cuisine, Zhejiang cuisine, Fujian cuisine, Hunan cuisine, Anhui cuisine. Those were the 8 major cuisine categories. He also thought about all of the specific renowned dishes that he had sampled in the past. There were simply too many to choose from, so he was suffering from choice anxiety. He was wondering what those dishes would be like when cooked using the special ingredients supplied by the system in conjunction with his supreme cooking skills. He thought about it for half a day, and it was close to opening time again, but he still hadn't made up his mind. "Father, I'm back." Amy's elated voice sounded from outside. Mag's voice immediately lit up upon hearing that. If he couldn't decide, then he could just let Amy decide. Mag opened the door, and Amy threw herself at him in her black magician robes. He caught her in a tight hug, and spun her around in a circle, while Amy giggled in his arms. He then looked at her with a warm smile, and asked, "Why is our little Amy so happy?" "I'm super happy because Father hugs me every day." Amy looked up at Mag with an affirmative expression. "What a sweet little girl." Mag's smile widened as he looked at Amy's adorable little face. She was the most precious thing in his life. I'm so envious that you have such a cute little daughter. I know, right? I see them showing off their affection every day, and I really want a daughter whenever I see that. You don't even have a wife yet. I'm just hoping that the baby in my wife's stomach is a little girl. All of the customers lining up outside the restaurant looked on with benevolent smiles. They were greeted by a show of affection between Mag and Amy every day, and they were quite envious of the father and daughter duo's relationship, but their mood was also lifted as a result. Amy, I can grant you a wish that's related to food. What do you want to eat aside from the food from our restaurant? I can cook it for you. Mamie Restaurant ignored those envious eyes, and carried Amy into the restaurant. Really? I can pick anything. Amy's eyes lit up with excitement. Yes, anything. Mag nodded with a smile. The system had promised him that all dishes were applicable, so he was confident that he could satisfy Amy's wish. Then, Amy contemplated momentarily before clenching her little fist, and exclaiming, I want to eat the Manchu-Han Imperial Feast. Mag's smile immediately froze on his face. He realized that he had been a little overconfident, but he wasn't expecting Amy to remember a promise that he had made so long ago. Father told me that the Manchu-Han Imperial Feast is super delicious, can you cook it for me now? Amy appeared to be oblivious to the awkward expression on Mag's face. That's not something I can make yet, as the Manchu-Han Imperial Feast is not just one dish. I haven't mastered that many dishes, and I don't have enough ingredients, so, Mag explained with an apologetic expression. So, I still can't eat the Manchu-Han Imperial Feast. Amy was a little disappointed, but she quickly put on a smile upon seeing Mag's awkward expression. She shook her head, and said, That's all right, don't be sad, Father. I don't even want to eat the Manchu-Han Imperial Feast. I love everything that Father cooks for me. Good girl. A rush of warmth flowed through his heart at the sight of Amy's thoughtful smile. He held her in his arms, and whispered into her ear, Believe in your father. I'm definitely going to make you a Manchu-Han Imperial Feast in the future, the kind that you can't finish even after eating for 3 days and 3 nights. I believe in you, Father. Father has never lied to me. Amy nodded before asking, If we can't finish it, can I invite Jessica, Big Sister Zixie, Big Bear, Master Turtle and Master Halfbeard to eat it with us? It would be a waste if we can't finish the food. Of course. You can also invite Aisha, Mia and all of your little friends to the feast as well. Mag nodded with a smile. His daughter sure was a generous little girl. You're the best, Father. Amy planted a kiss on Mag's face with her arms around his neck, and her face was alight with a blissful smile. Mag gently stroked her hair, and asked, Then, is there something that you really want to eat now? Like roast beef or roast lamb chops? Any one dish is fine. Amy thought about it momentarily before replying, I want to eat fish, the type that swims in water. I heard from Daphne that fish is super delicious and really succulent. But, she warned me that there were many sharp bones to be wary of. She even showed me a fish bone last time, it was transparent and really pretty, like a needle. Mag looked at Amy, and felt as if a sharp fish bone had pierced his heart. The best food that Amy had ever had was pancakes, and even at 4 years of age, she had still never even tasted fish. Fish wasn't even a noteworthy or expensive ingredient, but in her eyes, it was like some sort of treasure that was completely out of reach. All right, I'll cook fish for you. I'll make you the best grilled fish in the world, Mag promised with an earnest expression on his face. He had already decided what dish he was going to choose, spicy grilled fish. Grilled fish? Like cooking fish over a fire? Like grilled beef and grilled lamb chops? Amy was very curious. It's similar, but also a little different. You'll know when you see it. Mag didn't provide an in-depth explanation. Sichuan's spicy grilled fish consisted of grilling fish before braising it, so it really was different from grilling steaks and things like that. As long as it's made by father, it must be super delicious. That way, I can also eat super delicious fish, and I can show my fish bones to Daphne too. Amy nodded obediently with expectation shimmering in her eyes. What new magic spell did you learn from Master Urian today? Mag asked. Meow. Ugly Duckling crept over to Mag, and looked up at Amy with a hint of excitement. Put me down, father, and I'll show you what I've learned. Amy wriggled as Mag set her down on the ground. She extended her left hand, and assumed a very solemn expression. Both Mag and Ugly Duckling took half a step back. He didn't doubt Amy's magic aptitude in the slightest, but she had only just begun to learn magic, so he was still a little concerned about her control. If he were accidentally hurt by his own daughter, that would be a farce. Sally and Yabimiya also appraised Amy with curiosity. She was learning from two legendary magic casters, and was extremely talented. They were all wondering what she could have learned from Urian in one morning. In my name, I summon the flames of extreme frost, Amy chanted in her mellow voice. A sputtering sound suddenly erupted from her left palm, upon which a small ball of bluish-white fire appeared. Even though it looked like fire, its emergence made the surrounding air's temperature drop significantly, even to the extent that everyone's breathing was spreading drops of condensing vapor. Flames of extreme frost. Mag was a little surprised as he looked at the cold bluish-white flames on Amy's palm. It was like fire that had been carved from ice. It may be small, but it's super powerful. Let me demonstrate. Amy looked around before her eyes settled on Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling seemed to have been struck by a perilous premonition, and it immediately arched its back as its fur stood on its ends, preparing to run away at any moment. Don't run, Ugly Duckling, Amy instructed with a serious expression before tossing the small ball of fire toward it. The bluish-white fire hovered toward Ugly Duckling, which was just about to run away. It appeared to be moving at a leisurely speed, but it was still much faster than Ugly Duckling, so the fire landed upon it, and instantly erupted to encompass Ugly Duckling's entire body. Its body instantly stiffened, while the bluish-white flames spread, creating a large cube of ice. Ugly Duckling was frozen with its hackles raised and a horrified expression on its face. Mag had wanted to rush over to protect Ugly Duckling, but he wasn't as fast as the fireball, either. He wasn't expecting Amy to use Ugly Duckling as her experimental subject. The little guy was less than a month old, so it could die quite easily. Such pure ice flames! Sally was quite surprised as she looked at Amy. She had only been under Urian's tutelage for one morning, and she had already mastered such pure ice flames. She was really stunned by Amy's exceptional aptitude. Ugly Duckling won't freeze to death, will it? Yabimiya was still a little concerned. Even though Ugly Duckling wasn't that close with her, she still really liked to play with it when Amy was away on her lessons. Father, that's the new Flames of Extreme Frost spell that I learned this morning. Isn't it super awesome? Amy withdrew her hand with a triumphant expression. Yes, it is indeed super awesome, but Ugly Duckling, Mag nodded with approval. It was naturally amazing that Amy could master such a powerful spell in one morning, but he was still quite concerned about Ugly Duckling. Amy seemed to be able to sense Mag's concern, and assured, Ugly Duckling will be fine. Master Ugly Duckling told me that even after being frozen by the flames of extreme frost, there's a chance that the target would be able to survive. There's a chance? Mag's expression became even more strained. What an irresponsible little girl. It would be an absolute joke if Ugly Duckling were to die from this ordeal. Yes, a very high chance, Amy nodded earnestly. Then let's thaw it out first. Mag heaved a resigned sigh as he turned to the kitchen to find his knife. The block of ice wasn't a small one, so it was probably going to take a long time to melt. This will do it. Mag had only just turned around when a small ball of bluish-violet flames appeared in Amy's hand, and she tossed it at the frozen Ugly Duckling. I think it's seriously going to be cooked if you do that. Mag was once again too late to stop Amy, and could only look on as the fireball flew toward Ugly Duckling. It was a fireball that could blast third-tier swordsmen and magic casters flying. If it were to land on Ugly Duckling, the latter would probably be reduced to a pile of ashes. To his surprise, the small fireball didn't immediately explode upon making contact with the block of ice. Instead, it enveloped the block, and the ice was instantly melted before being vaporized. The bluish-white and bluish-violet flames nullified one another, snuffing out in unison. At the same time, the ice and fire around Ugly Duckling's body completely disappeared. Ugly Duckling's hackles were still raised, and it remained completely stationary for a full second after the ice block disappeared before shuddering violently. It leaped straight onto the counter, and stared at Amy and Mag with a dumbstruck expression as if it had no idea what had just happened. It's completely fine. Aside from receiving a fright, Ugly Duckling was completely fine, and Mag was quite surprised to see that. Both Amy's snap freezing and defrosting skills were top-notch. Wow, Ugly Duckling, you jumped onto the counter all by yourself. Looks like I won't have to carry you up there anymore, seeing as you can do it yourself. Amy was also quite surprised as she looked at Ugly Duckling. Meow! Ugly Duckling retreated a couple of steps in a timid manner upon hearing that, and it shook its head at Amy with a pitiable expression. I don't care. The fact of the matter is, you got onto the counter by yourself. Amy shook her head, and refused to listen to Ugly Duckling's pleas. Mag looked into Amy's eyes, and adopted a serious expression as he said, Amy, even though Ugly Duckling is fine, please don't use living creatures as experimental subjects for your spells. If something were to go awry, then we wouldn't be able to rectify our mistakes. But I already made sure that it wouldn't harm Ugly Duckling before casting the spells. Amy pouted with an indignant expression. Oh, then I'm sorry for wrongly accusing you. Mag immediately gave in at the sight of Amy's pitiable display. She was so kind, so there was no way she would put Ugly Duckling at risk. Urian had surely told her that those spells wouldn't be harmful to living creatures. I tried it on black coal many times, and it's still completely fine. Amy nodded with a smug expression. Mag was suddenly feeling a little sympathetic toward that annoying crow. Who would have thought that the Honorable Fama Odenben would be reduced to Amy's test subject? Furthermore, Urian had to have given her permission to conduct those experiments, so he couldn't really say anything about that. Perhaps it was part of a practical learning component of the lesson. All right, come and have some food. Make sure to study hard today as well. You don't have any lessons the day after tomorrow, so let's go fly a kite together. Mag patted Amy's head with a smile before picking her up, and placing her on a chair. Really? Father is going to fly a kite with me? The type that can fly super high in the sky. Amy was overjoyed. That's right, our kite will fly higher than everyone else's. Mag nodded with a smile. It was getting close to fall, and the winds were quite strong. As such, many people took their kids to the Aden Square and flew kites together. The day after the next was a holiday for the restaurant and for Amy as well, so it would be a perfect opportunity to do some kite flying with her. Amy waved her little fists around, elated, and yelled, "Yay! Father, you're the best! Aisha, Mia, you two should come and have a seat as well. We'll open for business after having some food," Mag said with a smile. Amy was always so easy to satisfy. He turned toward the kitchen, and asked internally, "System, can you change the wheel reward to the spicy grilled fish recipe? I don't want the other things, all I want now is a recipe for spicy grilled fish." No. The God of Cookery upgrade wheel is a revolutionary creation of the system, and it cannot be exchanged for anything. You can make the spicy grilled fish recipe one of the possible prizes, so after you complete the mission, you'll have a 1 in 7 chance of securing the recipe as your prize. The system's voice was very stern, leaving no room for negotiation. In a simple yet still luxurious study, a green letter was reduced to ashes between a set of long slim fingers. Josh sat on a redwood chair, and swirled the amber wine in the crystal goblet in his hand. His handsome face normally wore a benevolent and refined expression, but it was currently as cold as ice. "So you really survived, Alex. But where could you be hiding now? The Dragon Island? No, those idiots all want to kill you. Twilight Forest? No, countless orcs died by your hands in the battle on the border. There's no way you'd be at the Wind Forest, either. You have enough confidence and insanity, but appearing in the Wind Forest with that half-elf daughter of yours is pretty much asking for death." His low voice sounded in the room as he fiddled absent-mindedly with the papers on his desk. "If you're not in the Roth Empire, then you're most likely in Chaos City. All races and species live there, so no matter what kind of person appears there, they won't attract too much attention. Alex isn't very bright, but he's very alert. He knows which places are dangerous and which places are safe. However, trying to find someone in Chaos City isn't going to be easy." Josh slowly raised his goblet to his lips, but he suddenly stopped before taking a sip, and smashed the goblet violently into the ground. Amber wine and glittering crystal shards flew in all directions. Josh's face was twisted with a sinister expression as he clenched his fists, and snarled, "Alex, you'd better not let me find you. Even after so many years, Irina still hasn't forgotten about you. I have to kill you, and that little half-breed too. I was still too naive back then." "Are you all right, Your Highness?" The butler's anxious voice sounded from outside the door. Josh's expression immediately smoothed out as he replied, "I'm fine. Tell Seuss to come and see me." "Yes," the butler replied. The sound of footsteps hurrying away immediately followed. Josh pulled out a map from the top shelf of his bookshelf, and spread it open on his table. His brown eyes slowly scanned across the map, and his brows furrowed as if he were thinking about something. "Your Highness, Seuss is here." After a short while, the butler's voice sounded again. "Tell him to come in," Josh instructed without even raising his head. The heavy wooden door opened, and a thin and tall young man with cropped golden hair and wearing a set of black magician robes walked in. There was a red reaper scythe emblazoned on the chest of his robes. The magic caster appeared to be about 30 years of age, and his face carried a sickly pallor. There was a scar extending from his left eye to his glabella, while his pupils were a rare grey color, making them appear a little like dead fish eyes. His entire body was enveloped in those black magician robes, giving him a cold and sinister aura. He stepped onto the crystal shards on the ground with his black leather boots, creating a crackling sound, but his expression didn't change in the slightest. His fervent gaze was fixed on Josh, and he said respectfully, "Seuss pays his respects, Your Highness. I want you Azuras to find someone, then kill him." Josh shifted his gaze away from the map on the table. "Please specify our target, Your Highness." Seuss bowed his head in a respectful manner. "Mag Alex," Josh replied in a calm voice. "Alex?" Seuss immediately raised his head, and stared at Josh with shock and incredulity etched on his face. He hesitated momentarily before asking, "Your Highness, isn't Alex already dead? We've been searching for evidence to confirm his death during these past few years, and nothing indicates that he's still alive." Josh shook his head, and looked at Seuss with a serious expression as he said, "No, he's still alive, someone has already proven that to me. So, you must find him before anyone else does, and kill him. Return to me with his head. If Alex is still alive, then I'll be sure to kill him in revenge for what happened last time." Josh's expression suddenly turned sinister again, the scar on his glabella was like a hideous centipede now. "Remember, I don't care what happened between the two of you in the past, just find him and kill him. If you fail, then you can put an end to your own life," Josh said in a cold voice. "Yes." Seuss hurriedly bowed his head respectfully. Even though he was the youngest 9th-tier magic caster in the kingdom and the leader of the Azuras, he was still struck by a sense of fear and awe when interacting with Josh. That was not just because he was one of the people in line to the throne. He was more frightened by the fact that Josh was able to bring down Alex when he was at the height of his powers. That man was an extraordinary talent who had once stomped him into the ground. Back then, they had both advanced to the 9th tier at the same time, and theirs should have been an evenly matched battle, but it became the biggest disgrace of his life. One strike. Alex only used one sword strike to defeat him. If it weren't for the unavoidable sense of impending doom that he was struck by when the sword pierced his glabella, he would have never believed that he couldn't even take a single sword strike from Alex. From that day, he fell from grace, and became a laughingstock. After that, Alex continued to rise higher and higher, defeating 10th tier powerhouses and slaying giant dragons. His rate of progression and overwhelming power placed him well and truly at the pinnacle of the younger generation. Even a supreme prodigy like him could only look on in despair. Thus, a magic caster that had never skipped lessons went missing at the Magus Tower. At the same time, a new leader was instated among the Azuras, and his Reaper scythe harvested one life after another. Even though I know he's not dead, I still can't ascertain his location. The likeliest place is Chaos City. Josh pointed at a certain spot on the map on his desk, and said in a dark voice, "Remember, this must remain strictly confidential. No one aside from the Azuras is to hear about this." Seuss packed up the map on the table, and said respectfully, "Yes, I'll send scouts to Chaos City right away." Josh was momentarily silent before continuing, "Also, kill all of his friends and family as well, no matter who they are." "Yes." A hint of surprise flashed through Seuss's eyes, but he didn't say anything. "You can go now." Josh sat back down in his chair and closed his eyes. Seuss lowered his head, and took a couple of steps backward before turning to leave, closing the door to the study behind him. "Mag Alex, many people will be unable to sleep at night if you are still alive, so you should go and die," Josh's voice reverberated within the study. On the outskirts of Rodu, there was a black horse-drawn carriage situated outside a large estate. "Your Highness, this is Simon's estate," Quine said in a low voice. "Let's go in. I'm sure Simon will still be happy to see an old friend like me." The tall and broad Sean emerged from within the carriage. Even though he wasn't wearing any armor, his ramrod straight back and the killing intent emanating from his body made it quite apparent that he was a veteran general on the battlefield. The gates of the estate were tightly shut, and Sean only had Quine accompanying him. Everyone probably thought that the prince was still on the southwestern border thousands of kilometers away, directing his troops in battle. No one knew when he had returned to Rodu. The gate was opened after some knocking, and an old servant emerged with a cautious expression on his face. He didn't recognize Sean, but he could see that he was definitely no ordinary person. He asked, "Whom are you looking for?" Quine was about to say something, but Sean raised a hand to cut him off, and smiled as he said to the old servant, "This is General Simon's estate, right? Please inform him that Sean has come to visit him." "All right, please wait for a moment, I'll go and report to my master." The old servant nodded before closing the gate. He felt as if the name Sean was a little familiar, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it, not sure where he had heard it before. However, he was most likely a friend of his master's, so he didn't dare to delay. The old servant made his way to the backyard, where a brawny heavily bearded man was swinging a pickaxe repeatedly into the soil. The servant informed, "Master, there's a guest by the name of Sean who is here to see you." "Sean?" Simon immediately stopped what he was doing. A hint of surprise appeared on his face as sweat flowed down his tanned muscular chest. The servant was a little confused by Simon's expression, and asked, "Is he not a friend of yours?" No, I'm not worthy to be a friend of his." "Clinton, get everyone in the estate into the backyard. No one is allowed to go anywhere without my permission." Simon strode out of his garden, and casually put the pickaxe leaning against a tree. He picked up the towel that was hanging from a nearby tree branch, and wiped away the sweat on his face. He then dusted himself off, and strode toward the front of the estate. "Yes. Master, should I brew some tea?" the servant asked. "They're too good to drink our tea." Simon chuckled with a hint of mockery in his voice. The gate opened again when Sean was in the process of examining a griffin that had been carved onto the gate. He turned to Simon with a smile, and said, "I didn't think that you would have such skill. This carving is not bad at all." Simon looked at Sean with a calm expression, and said, "You're far too kind, Your Highness. I'm just a useless retired soldier with nothing to do, so I'm merely entertaining myself in my spare time." Sean looked into Simon's eyes, and said, "It looks like you're still holding a grudge against me, Simon." Simon's expression remained unchanged as he said, "I wouldn't dare. I am just an ordinary person, so how would I dare to hold a grudge against you, Your Highness? Just because you wouldn't dare doesn't mean you don't actually hate me. I know that all of the soldiers who left the army with you harbor animosity toward me. You all hate me for not saving Alex, and for not avenging him." Sean shook his head, and a guilty expression appeared on his face. He sighed, and continued, "To this day, I'm still unable to forgive myself. If only I could have received the news a little earlier. If only I could have been a bit more alert to the potential dangers, Alex would have never been plunged into that dire situation. Everyone dies eventually." Simon's expression didn't change at all in response to Sean's words. He had heard the same things said on more than one occasion. "Indeed, everyone dies eventually, even you and I will die someday." Sean nodded with a wistful look. He turned to Simon with a smile, and asked, "Are you not going to invite me to come in? If Your Highness would like to come in, who am I to say no?" Simon opened the gate wider, and ducked off to the side to allow the prince passage. "Even though I was reluctant to part with you veterans, I have to say that all of you made a smart choice. Only after leaving the border can you live such a leisurely and carefree life. Even I am feeling a little envious." Sean chuckled at the sight of the flora that Simon had planted in the yard. "Perhaps," Simon replied ambiguously. Sean looked around at his surroundings before his gaze settled on Simon. "Looks like we're the only ones here. I've come here today for a very simple reason. I wanted to ask you something. Please state any questions that you may have. I would be more than happy to answer them, Your Highness." Simon met Sean's gaze with a steady one of his own. Sean looked into Simon's eyes, and asked, "On the night when the event took place, where were you?" Meanwhile, Quine had crept around behind Simon. A metallic light gleamed in hand, and his eyes narrowed as his eyes focused on the spot where Simon's heart was located. "I had gone home to visit my mother's grave. That day was her death anniversary." Simon's reply was very placid, but there was a hint of rage in his eyes. Sean looked deep into Simon's eyes as if he were trying to see something different in them. Simon's hands balled up into tight fists, and a pained expression appeared on his face as he roared, "If I had been with him, I would have at least been able to act as a meat shield for him. Those shameless bastards, all of them deserve to die." His fists were trembling slightly as if he were repressing his violent emotions with all his might. "Indeed. All of them deserve to die, and they're all dead." Sean nodded as he took his eyes off Simon. He strode toward another room, and opened the door, upon which he was greeted by the sight of a series of completed and half-completed wooden statues as well as a pile of untouched wood in the corner. Among the statues, there were knights, magic casters, orcs, demons, elves. There were all types of different races, and all of them were battling with one another. The statues were all very lifelike. Sean glanced at all of the statues, and walked all the way to the end, where the largest statue lay. It was a statue of a griffin, and he smiled as he said, "Simon, if the third prince were to hear about your talents, he would surely be very fond of you." Simon shook his head, and said, "His Highness is a true master in wood carving. I am just a hobbyist, and I cannot compare to him." "How interesting." Sean chuckled as he strode out the door. As he did so, he said, "Simon, I've always thought that you were an interesting person, but it appears that you're even more interesting than I had imagined. However, I have to tell you something, hiding a person is different from hiding an object. If you don't hide a person well, and they end up being found, someone will die. I don't understand what you're trying to say, Your Highness. A peculiar look flashed through Simon's eyes, but his expression remained unchanged. Looks like you're not even going to offer me any tea. Farewell, then. Sean didn't provide any explanation. He made his way out of the room, and strode toward the gate. Upon reaching the gate, he paused, and looked at the griffin carved upon it. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "There seems to be someone missing." "Farewell, Your Highness." Simon didn't say anything in response. He merely bade the prince farewell, and looked on as his black horse-drawn carriage departed. He slowly closed the gate, and clenched his fists as he murmured to himself, "Everyone dies eventually, but they can't die for no reason. Your Highness, are we just going to go back now?" Quine was a little perplexed. Simon's reactions have told me everything I need to know. 3 years ago, he was a man that couldn't hide anything, so now that he's trying to hide something, it's quite easy to see through him. There were all types of statues in that room, but none of Alex. If he really were dead, then his statue would be the only one in the room. Sean smiled as he continued, "All you have to do is keep an eye on him from here onward. He will be the key to finding Alex."